The ancient eight-headed serpent was one of the kings who ruled the world of Gomorrah. It was the homeworld of the jinns, and any monster who reached that rank in that world was considered a true powerhouse. The world of Gomorrah had only one rule, and that was the survival of the fittest. The weak would be culled out, and those who survived only had two choices: submit to one of the most powerful beings in their world in order to survive, or become a powerhouse to create their own faction. The ancient eight-headed serpent lived deep underground and was busy accumulating its own strength. It had just broken through the rank of a Magian king, and was biding its time to overthrow one of the rulers where it was currently residing. However, when it sensed that it was being pulled toward the world of Solterra, it readily accepted the summons, thinking that it would be able to create its own kingdom in that world. The jinns knew of Solterra because it was one of the worlds that their race had invaded during the past hundreds of years. Some worlds had powerful protection and restrictions placed on them, which allowed only lower-ranking jinns to descend upon them. One of those worlds was Pangea. The strongest monsters that could descend on it were rank 9 sovereigns, barring the Magian princes, Magian kings, and fiends from entering the world. But Solterra was different. It was capable of accepting a Magian king. So as soon as the ancient eight-headed serpent received the opportunity, it didn't hesitate and finally arrived in the kingdom of Seneros. The moment it devoured King Zanmara, it found the monarch's taste to its liking. Because of this, it feasted on the citizens of the city, and although they were not as delicious as the monarch that he devoured, they still tasted good due to the power of their bloodline. But as it was enjoying its meal, it sensed a threat that was approaching it at great speeds. It then moved its head to look in the direction where the danger was coming from, but by then, it was already too late. The reinforced bolt pierced through one of the heads of the eight-headed serpent, making that head screech in pain as the bolt embedded itself on one of the snake's eyes. However, it didn't end there. Just as the eight-headed serpent was trying to understand what had happened, another bolt pierced its body, making it stagger. Suddenly, a third bolt once again embedded itself on the neck of one of the heads of the Magian king, making it hiss in anger. The remaining heads all glanced in the direction where the bolt came from and didn't hesitate to charge in that direction with fury. It didn't even bother to pull out the bolts that were still stuck in its body, as it only wanted to exterminate the creature who dared to attack it, while eating its meal. 13, who had already predicted this reaction, was already inside Rocky's mobile fortress. The Magma Balboa was also fleeing as fast as he could and headed deeper to the djinn-infested territory. Since Rocky was moving deep underground, the ancient eight-headed serpent didn't detect him right away. Instead, the monster charged at the nearest monster that it sensed inside the canyon, where the attack came from. A rank 6 alpha salamander, who had no idea what was happening, suddenly found itself inside the jaws of the Magian king, who didn't even give it a chance to defend itself from its overwhelming might. Of course, it didn't end there. A rank 5 scorpion, who happened to be hiding hundreds of meters away, also fell victim to the Magian king's rampage. As the ancient eight-headed serpent sensed more monsters in the vicinity, it continued to hunt them down one by one, heading deeper into the djinn-infested lands. However, as it continued to terrorize the pitiful and innocent monsters, it once again sensed something dangerous headed in its direction. This time, the Magian king was able to evade the attack, albeit barely, and the bolt hit the side of its body, creating sparks. Its heated gaze then locked on in the direction where the bolt came from. It headed there, abandoning the monsters that it was about to annihilate. 13, who had decided to fire one more bolt to lead the Magian king toward the absolute heaven, was once again inside Rocky's mobile fortress, who was fleeing for his life. This should be enough to buy the others time, 13 thought as he ordered Rocky to keep fleeing. An hour later, the Magma Balboa finally came to a stop as it rested deep underground. The members of the Parade of the 100 Demons were currently monitoring the Magian king, who had started to kill any monster in its path. After making sure that they were truly safe, 13 told Erica and Sherry that he needed to go somewhere for a short period of time, and advised the two of them to stay inside the mobile fortress and wait for him. After the two girls promised to behave, 13 activated the Ring of the Apocalypse. As soon as he appeared in the special domain that was under Metatron's control, A certain death bat approached him with a big smile on his face. 13. Camazotz shouted, "You're finally here." The other members of the Apocalypse glanced at the weakest member of their order and looked at him with a curious gaze. All of them were aware that the human boy had now formed a faction with the second weakest Magian prince, Camazotz, and the princess of prophecy, Camazotz. Truth be told, they were paying close attention to their small trinity because they had been making waves within their organization, even surpassing the achievements of the older members in a short period of time. "What are you doing here, my friend?" Camazotz said as he hung his shoulder around the teenage boy's neck, before lightly patting his head. "I came here because I need help," 13 replied. "Ha ha ha. Look no further." Camazotz patted its chest with confidence. "Are we going to fight again? Leave it to me. There's nothing in this world that I, Camazotz, fear." 13 looked at the smug-faced deathbat before opening his mouth. "I'm currently facing a Magian king, so I need help to defeat it," 13 stated. My stomach hurts." Camazotz immediately clutched his stomach with a pained expression on his face. "Damn. It must be because of that giant squid I ate for dinner. I think I'm suffering from indigestion. T. Sorry, 13. I need to take a dump first. I'll come back to you later after I'm done with my business." Without another word, the deathbat disappeared as it retreated back to its domain. 13 knew what kind of character Camazotz had, so he already expected this scene from happening. However, he didn't come to the Order of the Apocalypse for the deathbat. He came to seek the help of his other ally, who was now walking in his direction. Camazotz, who heard 13's statement, frowned as she approached the young man, who was asking for help. "What kind of Magian king are you fighting?" Camazotz asked. "It's an ancient 8-headed serpent," 13 replied. The frown on Camazotz's face deepened because she could vaguely remember a creature that matched 13's description. "I can't help you fight against a Magian king," Camazotz said in a serious tone. "I know," 13 replied. "But I need you to help me with something else." "What is it?" "As long as it's not about fighting the Magian king directly, I will help you as much as I can," Camazotz declared. "I need you to do a divination for me," 13 stated. "Tell me what I need to do or where I need to go to survive that monster for 30 days. The Magian princess pondered a bit before nodding in understanding. "Very well. Come with me," Camazotz said as she took the teenage boy's hand and pulled him towards one of the private rooms of the Order. Beelzebub, one of the oldest members of the Order of the Apocalypse, played with his beard as he looked at the teenage boy who was being led away by Camazotz. He was one of the 2 Magian kings within the Order of the Apocalypse, who were hiding their true rank from the rest of their peers. "An ancient 8-headed serpent," Beelzebub muttered. "Can it be?" When he was still in Gomorrah, he came across such a monster, and it had left a deep impression on him because of how powerful it was. Only a handful of individuals knew of its name, and Beelzebub was one of them. If his guess was right, then the name of the ancient 8-headed serpent that 13 was running away from was none other than Orokai, the 8-headed serpent who almost killed Beelzebub when he was still living in the Jinn homeworld of Gomorrah. "We wouldn't be in this mess if that Zion Leventis hadn't messed with the mission," Elyon said to the Wanderers, who were currently thinking of what to do next. "Give it a rest already," Sean commented. "You kept on blaming him, but have you done anything to contribute to this mission? What about the last mission? Aren't you ashamed of yourself for badmouthing the person who allowed you to survive that war?" "HMPH. Even without him, I could have easily survived," Elyon replied. "All you do is talk big, but can you back those words?" Drazit asked in irritation. "Can you break the barrier that surrounded the city and stop the summoning ceremony?" "I can't do it alone," Elyon admitted. "But if everyone here worked together, I'm sure we could have done something." Suddenly, a laughter filled with ridicule and contempt spread inside the underground cavern, which made all the Wanderers look in the direction of a rat man whom they had seen a few times in the lizard men camp. He was none other than Kasari, who had become part of 13's parade of 100 demons. "You're only able to spout this bullsh*t because you haven't faced the monarch of Seneros," Kasari sneered. "Even if all of you brats work together, you won't even leave a tiny scratch on his body. Not to mention, is also the king of the kingdom. Aside from him, he has guards that are of the master and grandmeister rank. Some of them are even champions. But that won't even be your biggest problem. If any of you were to touch the barriers surrounding his city, all of you would be burned to a crisp. In my eyes, you're just an ungrateful worm who can only spout nonsense. I truly wonder why Zion is risking his life to lure that Magian king away from this place. If I were in his position, I would have let it devour all of you ungrateful swines, who only managed to survive because of him. What nonsense are you talking about? Elyon, who had been looked down upon by the rat man, glared back in anger. Nonsense. Kasari chuckled. Are you dumb? This underground cavern is just 2 to 4 to 5 miles away from the city of Seneros. The opponent is an ancient 8-headed serpentine Magian king. Do you really think weaklings like you can escape its detection? Don't forget djinns like to eat humans. It's impossible for it to not smell your filthy stench even from 5 miles away. Do you know how fast it can reach this place? Less than a minute. In less than a minute, all of you would have died if Zion didn't lure it away. Such imbeciles. The rat man then spat on the ground as if talking to Elyon disgusted him very much. Enough nonsense. I have come here to pass a message from Zion Leventis, Kasari stated. All of you have 3 choices. The first one is to stay here and pray that the Magian king doesn't return and detect your presence. The second one is for all of you to escape individually or in groups in order to survive for a month using your own power. Last but not the least, you can use the tunnel that led to the south of the fractured heaven, passing through the river that separated the north and the south through an underground tunnel. I have discovered that tunnel by chance, and if we manage to cross it and return to the territory of the lizard man, your chances of survival will increase. Since there's a special barrier that prevents anyone from crossing the river, the Magian king might not be able to cross it. Kasari scanned the faces of the wanderers, who were looking at him with fear, doubt, and anxiety. I will give you half an hour to decide, Kasari said. Those who wish to use the tunnel, you will follow my lead. The travel will take at least 10 days if you are going to bring your wagons with you. Don't worry, the passages are wide enough for wagons to pass through. Diana, who was the current leader of the Wanderers, pondered for a bit before nodding her head. We will discuss what course of action to take, Diana said. Thank you for telling us that we have a third option of escape. Kasari nodded. Remember, you only have half an hour. There's no guarantee that the Magian king will not return here. Also, not all the citizens of the city of Seneros are dead. There are still a few hundred survivors, so there's a possibility that the Magian king will come back to finish what he started. One last thing. I will not be taking that brat with me. Your name is Elyon, right? You can stay here and try to survive on your own. I don't like carrying extra baggage. I'm not like Zion, who will hold your hand and take you to safety. Who even needs the help of a filthy rat like you? Elyon shouted back in shame and anger. I can survive by myself. Kasari shrugged, not even bothering to reply to the teenage boy's words. In his eyes, everyone here was just extra baggage, with the exception of Diana and Drazit, whom his master was trying to save. The members of the Parade of the 100 Demons were observing everything happening on the surface and relaying the location of the Magian king in real time. Finally, after a discussion, Diana decided to take the majority of the Wanderers, who didn't wish to stay in their hiding place, to the tunnel that would lead them back to the territory of the Lizard Men. To his surprise, the members of the Siny faction, as well as the Apostles, decided to stay behind. I want to see this till the end, David said. I know that it's dangerous to stay here, but I feel like there's no safe place at all, with a Magian king in this territory. Since it can traverse several miles in a minute, I think I'll have a higher chance of survival traveling with my team. I feel the same way too, Sean commented. Although it is dangerous, I don't feel like being in debt with someone. I admit that I've had an easier time here in Solterra than expected, and it was all due to Zion's help. But now that he is luring the monster away from this place, I want to help him if possible. Diana was moved by Sean's words. She also wanted to stay, but Zion had entrusted her with the safety of the Wanderers. Because of this, she had no choice but to lead them to safety. I'll also stay, Drazit declared. If these kids have the courage to stay, I will feel ashamed if I return to my tribe knowing that I ran away in fear. The other lizard men looked at their temporary leader with conflicted expressions on their faces. In the end, they decided to stay as well because they were lizard man warriors. It was not in their nature to flee if their commander decided to stay on the battlefield. Kasari eyed Drazit for a few seconds before smiling faintly. He had the opportunity to face the lizard man in battle once, so he knew that he didn't lack courage. Now that everyone had made their decision, the rat men led Diana and the other wanderers to the Tunnel 13 had asked to be made beforehand. It was the route that he planned to take as a last resort if the Jinn invasion went out of control. Sean watched the others go before leading his faction to the surface, alongside David and Drazit, so that they could better understand their situation. Of course, one of the reasons why Sean decided to separate from Diana was because he couldn't leave Elyon alone. The families of the Siny faction were allies, so he thought that it would be best to keep his people safe and lead them to the next mission with his abilities. Lastly, he wanted to be like Zion, someone who could lead a group of wanderers and allow them to showcase their talents. Although he knew that Elyon didn't share the same views that he did, he still decided to let the teenage boy stay in his group so that he could keep an eye on him. While all of this was happening, 13 was currently sitting across the Magian princess, Camazotz, and waiting for her to start her divination. He was looking for a path with the highest chance of survival, and he was hoping that the Magian princess could shed some light on how he might be able to overcome the calamity that had descended within the absolute heaven. Camazotz took out 3 dice made up of bones and placed it at the center of the table. She then placed several crystals of different colors, forming a hexagon. 13 calmly watched as the Magian princess set up everything she needed for her divination. A few minutes later, Camazotz eyed the teenage boy and offered him a small dagger. "Drop a blood on each dice," Camazotz said. 13 nodded and obeyed the Magian princess's words. He didn't even bother to question the process because he was already familiar with it. One of his hosts also specialized in divinations, so he understood that they all have different ways on how to glimpse into the future. The only downside of having this kind of ability was that powerful seers and oracles wouldn't be able to see their own fates. Once the teenage boy was done dropping his blood on all 3 dice, the symbols on their surface started to glow red, indicating that they were now ready to be used for divination. Camazotz picked up the 3 dice and placed them between her fingertips. She didn't throw them right away. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed it in the direction of the north. "To the north, I ask for blessings so that my voice will be heard," Camazotz said before moving her hand to point at the south. "To the south, I ask for guidance so that a legacy will be told." The Magian princess then moved her hand to the west and uttered another phrase. "To the west, I ask for leniency so that my eyes may see through the hidden veil," Camazotz said softly before pointing to the east, completing the chant of divination. "To the east, I ask for a miracle so that the vision I seek will manifest in reality." The 3 dice between her fingers slowly rose up in the air and started to juggle and spin randomly. Golden sparks flashed as they hit each other. This lasted for nearly half a minute before they fell on the table, tumbling across its surface and hitting the crystals that formed a hexagon before returning to the center. The numbers 1, 7, and 5 shone faintly, which made Camazotz shake her head helplessly. 13. "It seems that I am unable to help you," Camazotz said. "A higher power is preventing me from peeking into the future and finding a way for you to solve your current crisis." "It's fine," 13 replied. "I expected as much. Thank you for your help, Camazotz." The teenage boy then stated the 3 numbers that added up to the number 13. It was as if the dice were telling him that the only way to solve his problem was for him to solve it himself without relying on the power of divination. "Is fighting the Magian King part of your mission?" Camazotz asked. "It's only one of the options," 13 answered. "The other option is to survive for a month." "Then just choose survival," Camazotz advised. "You can't hope to defeat a Magian King with your current strength." 13 nodded. "I know. I don't really plan on fighting it." "So you say, but I can tell that you're tempted to do it." Camazotz smiled. "You like to live your life dangerously, Zion. Perhaps this is also the reason why I found you quite interesting. Do you have a soft spot for reckless bad boys? 13 arched an eyebrow. No, Camazotz replied. But I like to watch humans struggle, especially when they are facing something that seems impossible to overcome. You have quite a bad hobby. Well, having hobbies is a good thing. 13 then crossed his arms over his chest and closed his eyes. Just like what Camazotz had stated, he wanted to see if he could defeat a Magian King using his schemes. When he destroyed the wall, his goal was to let the Jinns deal the finishing blow to King Zanmara and borrow their strength to clear their mission. But something unexpected happened that the teenage boy didn't foresee. A Magian King descended into the world, and it was quite powerful. The bolts he had used against it would have seriously injured a rank 8 sovereign, and even killed them if he managed to catch them by surprise. Although it managed to pierce through the ancient 8-headed serpent's body, it was not enough to kill it. The members of the Parade of the 100 Demons, who were keeping watch on the Magian King, informed him that the monster had pulled out his bolts, and all the injury it received had already regenerated. These bolts were, of course, coated with Tiona's poison. But whether it would have an effect against a Magian King, even 13 didn't have high expectations. He already did what he could have done at that moment, so he shall wait for nature to take its course. After his session with Camazotz, he went to look for Metatron and asked him to take him to the place where the monsters that he had captured were staying. When he arrived, Zed, Elyon, Gwen, and the Goblin Emperor all looked at him with serious expressions on their faces. Zed, do you wish to leave this place? 13 asked the Birdman, whom he captured first. If you agree to my condition, I will ask Metatron to free you. Yes, Zed replied in a heartbeat. State your condition. Fight for me just once, 13 stated. I am currently facing a Magian King. It is an ancient 8-headed serpent. I do not expect you to defeat it. However, with your speed, you will not be able to get hit by its attacks. All I want is for you to trust me and obey my order unconditionally, even if it sounds unreasonable. As long as you don't order me to die or commit a suicide attack, I will do it, Zed replied. But facing against a Magian King is already suicidal. All I need to do is not get hit, right? 13 nodded. Exactly. So will you do it? The Birdman didn't even need to think and nodded in agreement. How about me? Elyon asked. I want to escape this place as well. Give me the same condition that you gave Zed. No, 13 replied. You will just be food for the Magian King. I can't risk you dying at this point in time. The Goblin Emperor, who had been captured by Metatron, also wanted to ask 13 to give it a chance for freedom. But the teenage boy only shook his head. Just like Elyon, the Goblin Emperor didn't have any means to survive a confrontation with a Magian King either. Only Zed, who could fly extremely fast, had a chance to survive such a monster. Your proposal is good, 13, but do you think that I will agree to it? Metatron asked with a smile. I don't know, 13 answered, but I really need Zed's help. Fighting against a Magian King is suicidal, and if he is around, at least I wouldn't have to worry about dying with him to carry me to safety. The god of the apocalypse pondered for a bit if he should agree to the teenage boy's proposal. Technically, Zed and Elyon had no onus. 13 caught them using an artifact that Metatron gave him, which directly transported the rank 8 sovereigns to the Order of the Apocalypse. But since he had already thought of allowing 13 to gain subordinates if he caught more higher-ranking monsters, he decided that it would not be bad to agree to the teenage boy's request. Very well. I will allow him to leave this place as long as he agrees to your condition, Metatron stated. Of course, I will bind him using my power to make sure that he doesn't defy your orders. 13 bowed. Thank you, Metatron. After Metatron used his powers to bind Zed to become 13's temporary beast slave, the teenage boy returned inside Rocky's mobile fortress, alongside the rank 8 sovereign that terrorized the Dvalin Federation several months ago. But when he returned to the mobile fortress, he found someone whom he didn't expect to make an appearance. You really messed up big time, Zion. The Laplace demon welcomed the boy with his arms crossed over his chest. Come with me. The one wants to see you. Before 13 could even reply, the right-hand man of the God of Wanderers rested his hand on the teenage boy's shoulder. Then and there, The two of them disappeared right in front of Erica's and Sherry's eyes. 13 blinked innocently as Laplace Demon, and the one looked at him with serious expressions on their faces. The one usually appeared only as a sun that burned in the heavens, but at that moment, he took on a human form, a monk with a bald head. "I know you only did what you think is right," the one said, "and I don't really blame you for what happened. Nevertheless, things escalated to a degree that even we didn't predict. According to my own calculations, King Zanmara would summon a peak rank 9 sovereign, which can be considered as a pseudo-Magian prince. In the worst-case scenario, he would be able to summon a Magian prince that had recently made a breakthrough. But he would summon this monster from the world of Solterra. The Magian king who goes by the name Orokai, who is currently hunting you in absolute heaven, came from the Jinn homeworld, Gomorrah. This is a serious matter. Not only is it a very savage and powerful being, but the aftermath of its rampage can escape the borders of absolute heaven. As you may already know, other wanderers are doing missions on the neighboring lands adjacent to the absolute heaven. If Orokai makes their way to their location, things could spiral out of control. So what we need to do is either contain him or eliminate him while he is still inside absolute heaven. But it's impossible for me and Laplace Demon to interfere directly. You already know this, right? 13 nodded. I know. I'm supposed to be the antivirus software that fixes bugs in Solterra. That's right, the one admitted. You are the only one who can break down the wall that separates fractured heaven from the rest of the world using your disintegrator ability. That's also the reason why I sent you to fractured heaven. 13 nodded because he already suspected that his action was within the one's calculations. But just like you, we didn't predict that something like this will happen, Laplace Demon said. Which is why we decided to have an emergency meeting with you in order to find a solution to our current problem. The one nodded. As long as it doesn't go against the restrictions placed upon us, we will do everything to help you overcome this trial. Remember, the goal is to either contain Orokai in absolute heaven or eliminate it completely. There is no third option. 13 crossed his arms over his chest and closed his eyes. He started to create simulations on how to stop Orokai based on the data he obtained from their short clash with each other. The Magian King was a full-blooded Jinn, unlike the other Jinns in Solterra who were hybrids. This meant that, in terms of raw strength, not only was it more powerful than the monsters in their world, but it was also 3 times more savage. Even Camazotz and Camrasipa, 13's allies, were hesitant to face off against such a creature. Because of this, he needed to compromise and asked Zed to help him deal with the monster, but their goal was to only keep it busy until the 30-day time limit ended. However, this was not what the Laplace Demon and the One wanted. They wanted to make sure that Orokai would never leave the territory of absolute heaven and start its reign of terror to the rest of the world. Since it's a Magian King, the possibility of its gaining control over the Jinns in absolute heaven is high, 13 thought. But if my calculation is correct, there must be another Magian King in the absolute heaven. Otherwise, things won't make sense. If the race of the absolute race was wiped out, it could only mean that there was a Magian King or several Magian princes that appeared during the Jinn invasion. Since they were territorial by nature, they would certainly make the absolute heaven their base of operations as they expanded outward. Is there another Magian King in absolute heaven? 13 asked after pondering for a few minutes. There is one more Magian King in absolute heaven, the one replied. It's a demonic salamander, but it's weaker than Orokai. It's likely that it has already become aware of Orochi's presence and is planning to make its escape. Wait, if that demonic salamander leaves absolute heaven, won't it pose the same problem as Orokai leaving the absolute heaven? 13 frowned. No, the one shook his head. This demonic salamander dislikes conflicts and only wants to sleep. It had been sleeping for hundreds of years, only waking up for a few days every decade to eat the spiritual veins of absolute heaven. After going into hibernation, the destroyed spiritual veins would regenerate after a decade, and the cycle repeats all over again. It seems that it plans to break through into a fiend in the future, though it will take at least 2,000 years before that happens. Even if it ranks up, it will pose no problem to the current balance of power in Solterra, Laplace Demon commented. But a Magian king like Orokai is a different matter. Its threat level is second only to the fiends and celestials. We must stop it before it devours stronger creatures, which would help it evolve into another fiend in less than a decade. 13 sighed before nodding in understanding. I will need to return to Pangea for a bit. Can you allow me to do that? I will allow it, the one stated. Where do you want to go? The Rigel continent, 13 replied. I want you to take me to where the Earth Dragons are. The Laplace demon and the one glanced at each other before shifting their attention back to the boy in disbelief. You plan to ask for their help? The one asked. Are you sure that they will agree to help you? I'm not sure, 13 replied. But I have nothing to lose if I do it, right? The one pondered for a moment before waving his hand. A dimensional gate appeared in front of 13, which led directly to the 3 Earth Dragons who were currently busy watching a popular series in Netflix, which had become one of their hobbies. The 3 Earth Dragons of the Rigel continent were living a life they never thought they would. After eating different kinds of food, from junk food to high-class dishes prepared by the best chefs in the world, their palate had changed completely. Not only that, but they were introduced to watching shows on TV, which made them become fans of certain celebrities. They also liked to play console games and had become addicted to chatting with others over the internet. Indy, the only female Earth Dragon in the group, had also become an online shopper, buying the latest fashion brands and cosmetics, as well as other items that women used on a daily basis. In short, she had become a fashionista and would often call Michael to have her items delivered as fast as possible. Just when the 3 were wiping their tears with tissue paper due to a heartbreaking scene in the show that they were watching, 13 appeared in front of them. When he saw the 3 Earth Dragons crying, he thought that something terrible had happened to them. However, after realizing that they were just watching a show on Netflix, he decided to walk to the side and wait until the show was finished. 15 minutes later, the show finally ended, and the 2 Earth Dragons finally regained their composure. You're back, Zion, Indy said as she finished wiping the tears in her eyes. Did your mission in Solterra end? You came earlier than expected, the leader of the Earth Dragons, Rog, said with a smile. Did you come to see how we are doing? 13 shook his head. No, my mission has still not ended. I'm actually here to ask the 3 of you for help. You're asking us for help. The 3rd Earth Dragon, Brasm, arched an eyebrow. The 3 Earth Dragons had taken a liking to Zion, and they believed that the teenage boy had a lot of potential. However, since he was asking them for help, it meant that he was currently facing a problem that even he couldn't deal with on his own. Do you guys know about an ancient 8-headed serpent named Orokai? 13 asked. Is currently in the way of my mission. How did that savage snake appear in Solterra? Seeing the 3 Earth Dragons' reactions, he could tell that they knew of the Magian king he was talking about. Do you know it? 13 asked. Yes, Indy replied. There was a time when it invaded our territory. Fortunately, the 3 of us working together is enough to create a defensive wall that blocked Oroch's advance. He is very strong, but since we have full control over the earth element, he wasn't able to break past our defenses, Rog stated. But that was it. The only thing we can do is defend with all of our might. I'm glad that it left because we were also reaching our limits back then, Brasm commented. In the end, he is still a Magian king. If one of us had been missing during that battle, we would have been easily defeated. 2 Earth Dragons are definitely not enough to stop it. The 3 of them glanced at each other before shifting their gaze back to Zion. Do you want us to help you deal with that monster? Rog asked. Yes, 13 replied. My goal is to defeat it. Defeat it? Indy looked at the teenage boy in disbelief. I don't think it's possible. Even if we agree to help you, the only thing that we can do is defend. Nothing else. That's fine, 13 replied. I only need you to stop it. Also, I will guarantee that none of you will get killed by it. You can guarantee that. Brasm asked. But before 13 could answer, someone else answered for him. He can't, but I can. The 3 Earth Dragons felt a chill run down their spine as their gazes landed on the demi-human bunny wearing butler clothes, who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Fiend! Indy gasped in shock after realizing the strength of the Laplace demon. The two other earth dragons looked at the demon with wary gazes because this being was someone that even surpassed the power of a Magian King. "I will guarantee your safety," Laplace Demon repeated. "If ever there will come a time when the Magian King is about to land a killing blow to any of you, I will immediately teleport you back here in the Rigel continent." The three earth dragons exchanged glances with each other before shifting their gaze to the teenage boy, who was standing beside the Laplace Demon. "Are there any benefits if we help you, Zion?" Indy asked. "If the conditions for helping you are good, we might consider your proposal." Phaeton pondered a bit before looking at the three earth dragons with a faint smile on his face. "How about this? I will try to convince the Laplace Demon to allow you to leave the Rigel continent and explore the world in your human forms. Of course, you will have restrictions placed on you so that you won't be able to harm others as you travel the world. Lastly, I will arrange for you to meet your favorite celebrities and even get the chance to join them as actors on set. Who knows? Maybe the three of you can become the next superstars of the world." The corner of Laplace Demon's lips twitched because 13's proposal was crazy. How could three earth dragons wander around the world and even become superstars? But before he could even tell 13 that what he wanted wasn't possible, the three earth dragons immediately stood up and surrounded the teenage boy. "Ha ha ha! I can now finally meet my favorite idol, Maiku." Brasm laughed out loud. "Can I also go on a date with Yang Yang?" Indy asked. "I mean, he's totally my type. There is this actress named Zendaya that I like," Rog said in a serious tone. "Can we work together in a TV show or movie with the two of us being the main leads?" "Of course," 13 replied in a heartbeat. How could he not possibly agree to such a thing? Going on a fan meetup with the idol Maiku? Consider it done. Going on a date with a heartthrob Yang Yang? Even if he tied him up and dragged him kicking and screaming, 13 would see it through till the end. Performing together with the popular actress Zendaya? No problem. He would even arrange for Rog to wear the Spider-Man costume and create a movie called Spider-Man: Far From Home, script written by Zine Leventis. While the three earth dragons were celebrating because their wishes would be granted, the Laplace Demon pinched the bridge of his nose. In the end, the right-hand man of the one decided to let Arthur Leventis handle the aftermath of the mess that his no-good grandson was planning to make after dealing with a Magian King in the world of Solterra. Also, the three earth dragons added a second condition, and that was to ensure that the dimensional gate they were protecting wouldn't be destroyed while they were away. Laplace Demon reluctantly agreed to this condition. After all, this was a main task of the three earth dragons, who were now pumped up to face the Magian King whom they had fought with in the past. But instead of heading directly to the absolute heaven, 13 asked Laplace Demon to take him somewhere else in Solterra. This place was none other than the Valbera archipelago, where 13 would ask his fourth helper, who was currently taking a nap near the statue of Zion, unaware that it was about to get kidnapped whether it liked it or not. 13 looked at the sleeping monster in front of him, who was easily 40 meters long and 10 meters tall. Once Cranky stood up from his slumber, he would be at least 5 to 8 meters taller. Such a figure was undoubtedly imposing. Did Cranky undergo a mutation in the 3 years that I didn't see him? 13 thought as he looked at the imposing monster in front of him. He last saw the devil-horned honey badger during the battle in the Arcadia archipelago. At that time, the latter was only a rank 8 sovereign. But now, Cranky had mutated into a colossal demonic honey badger, which was a peak rank 9 sovereign. "Oi, Cranky, wake up," 13 said as he lightly poked the nose of the colossal honey badger, who was drooling on the teenage boy's statue. 13 ignored the admiring looks of the people and monsters who had come to pay homage to the Statue of Heroes, which was a very popular attraction within the Valbera archipelago. Perhaps, feeling annoyed that someone was daring enough to poke its nose, Cranky opened its eyes and glared at the bold creature whom it decided to eat for lunch. But realizing that the one poking him was none other than Zion, Cranky dismissed that notion and reached out for the human boy, pressing him against its chest before closing its eyes to sleep. "Ooh." 13, who had become the colossal demonic honey badger's hug pillow, couldn't help but grimace. Cranky had controlled its strength so that he wouldn't be crushed by its hug, but he was still unable to break free due to how strong the monster had become. In the end, 13 decided to give up and asked Rocky to take him and Cranky inside his mobile fortress. Since Cranky was considered 13's ally, Rocky didn't have any problems in kidnapping the sleeping honey badger, whom they planned to take back to the absolute heaven. The three Earth Dragons, who were still in their human forms, couldn't help but chuckle when they saw 13's helpless expression as he was hugged by the monster who seemed to be having a good dream. Zed, who was also inside the mobile fortress, looked at the honey badger with his arms crossed over his chest. Although he was calm on the surface, deep inside, he was actually very surprised. Not only did the boy manage to get the help of the three Earth Dragons whom he served in the past, but he was also able to take another strong helper, which looked very imposing. But his surprise was nowhere near the level of Erica, Sherry, and Ratatoska, whose heads were feeling light as they looked at the rank 8 and rank 9 sovereigns that had suddenly appeared inside Rocky's mobile fortress. Erica and Sherry recognized Zed. After all, he was a very famous monster that the Dvalin Federation had fought countless times. However, they didn't recognize the three Earth Dragons who were in their human form. If not for the fact that 13 had introduced them to the two girls before he went to talk to Cranky, they would have no idea that they were actually looking at the three rank 9 sovereigns whom the Allied forces didn't dare to fight head-on. With this lineup, do you think we stand a chance? Sherry asked Erica. I don't know, Erica replied. But our situation doesn't feel as hopeless as before. It's still not enough, 13, who overheard the conversation of the two girls, answered. At most, we will only be able to take a defensive stance. But ultimately, we will lose in the end. If we are fighting against a Magian Prince, then we might still have a chance of winning. Unfortunately, a Magian King is a different kind of monster. To put matters into perspective, a Magian Prince was like a tank that could destroy almost anything in its path. A Magian King, on the other hand, was an aircraft carrier. In terms of size and raw power, a Magian Prince couldn't even compare to the other's strength. This was a reason why Camazotz decided to escape before 13 was able to rope him into helping him face the Magian King, which even Camarotz didn't want to deal with. Suddenly, Cranky opened its eyes and looked at its surroundings. A few seconds later, the drowsiness in its face disappeared when he sensed that there were also other strong monsters in the vicinity. The colossal savage honey badger screeched as it stood up on its two hind legs, holding 13 like a baby. Standing at nearly 40 meters tall, it was almost half the size of an adult Earth Dragon, who was 100 meters tall. Cranky, calm down for a bit, 13, who was still being cuddled by the honey badger, said. They are friends of mine. The honey badger narrowed its eyes before placing the teenage boy on the ground and once again stood on four legs. A quick glance at its surroundings made it realize that it was no longer in the Valbera archipelago but inside Rocky's mobile fortress. This wasn't the first time that Cranky had been taken by 13 to help in battle. Because of this, it simply glared at the Earth Dragons who were looking at the honey badger with solemn expressions on their faces. Not bad, Rob commented. This monster is really strong. Right? Andy nodded. But not enough to defeat Orokai, Brasm stated. The three Earth Dragons watched as 13 explained the current situation to the honey badger, who now busied itself with eating the body of the camouflage spider that 13 had taken after it was defeated. Cranky listened from start to finish without saying a word. It simply ate until the spider was no more before lying on the ground. Once again, it grabbed hold of 13 as a hug pillow before yawning and going back to sleep. It was Cranky's way of telling 13 that he would help the teenage boy despite the fact that the enemy was stronger than him by 2 realms. After evolving as a mutant monster, Cranky could be considered a pseudo-Magian Prince. Although it wasn't truly a Magian Prince, it was as strong as one, which made 13 wonder how strong the honey badger would be once it stepped into the rank of a Magian Prince. We still lack offensive power, 13 thought. Zed is fast. The 3 Earth Dragons are defensive fighters, and Cranky is an all-rounder. I need a strong offensive fighter to deal damage to Orokai. Since the teenage boy couldn't escape from Cranky's hold, he simply formulated a strategy on how they could get the upper hand against the Magian King. At the same time, he suddenly felt drowsy. When he regained his senses, he found himself in the celestial realm, looking at the being who had been talking to him in passing as of late. I already told you this, but I will say it again, the being in front of 13 said before sipping the cup of wine in his hand. Since it has been a while since we saw each other, I'll lend you my strength once. This is the least I can do for my old partner. 13 nodded. Thank you, but your help is like a trump card. If possible, I don't want to use it against a Magian king. Kakaka, the being laughed out loud because he was very happy that his former system thought highly of him. 13. Sometimes, it's more important to look at the present than the future. After all, we exist in the present. Both of us have many regrets, and we often wonder what would have happened if we had done things differently. Don't have any regrets, and don't hesitate. You will only have a future if you manage to grab hold of the present. Do you understand? Yes, 13 replied. Thank you, old friend. The being smiled faintly before waving goodbye at the system who allowed him to stand at the top of the world and bring the heavens to its knees. When 13 was born, he didn't become the system of cannon fodders right away. All systems were allowed to choose their chosen ones, and he chose a unique individual as his first host. 13's first partner was a very eccentric creature who liked mischief. That creature also liked to create chaos and valued freedom a lot. 13 had spent hundreds of years with him, and through their journeys, the system, who was only starting to know more about the world, gradually noticed a few things. Since his first host was neither good nor evil, 13 was able to see the many faces of the world through his eyes. At first, he was indifferent to the things that he saw. But after hundreds of years, he was starting to question many things. Of course, his host was more than happy to answer his questions. The human hadn't thought of 13 as a tool, but as a friend who suddenly appeared in his life when he was all alone in the world. Why do those people suffer? Is it because they are weak? That's right, 13's first host replied. In this world, might makes right. Even if you are wrong, as long as you are strong, you are right. Everyone else will have to give way for you. But why? Isn't there some other way? Why don't they talk to each other? The weaker one tried to compromise with that stronger guy, but the stronger guy refused to listen and beat the weaker guy without even trying to understand his words. Is he illiterate? Well, some people are just dumb, 13's host replied while picking on his nose. If they were as smart as me, things would not escalate to fights. I doubt it. You're not exactly that bright, you know. Aish, whose side are you on? Your side, of course. But I'm just telling the truth. Forget it. Let's just look for something to eat. Don't eat your booger, okay? It's not hygienic. TSK. After 400 years, his first host stood tall upon the apex of the world and looked down on the mortal realm with a sad smile on his face. Are you really going, 13? Ah yes, you have achieved what you need to achieve in this lifetime. I can no longer offer any help to you. Then where will you go? During the time that I spent with you, I realized that you are truly blessed by the heavens. Despite the hardships that you encountered in life, you are able to overcome them all and soar toward the skies, unfettered by anything. But I have come to a realization that there are many more people in this world who need my help more than you do, especially those people whom you call cannon fodders. But what's the point of helping them? Since they are cannon fodders, they are fated to be cannon fodders. Can't I change their fate? Since I'm a system, I'm sure I can at least do something for them. 13's first host sighed, but he didn't oppose his friend's decision. 13. I have come to a realization after reaching my current realm. And that is, fate is the hand of cards we've been dealt. Choice is how we play the hand. But what if I tell you that regardless of the choices you make, you are bound to follow the path that has been set for you since birth? Simply put, if you are fated to be a cannon fodder in this lifetime, you are doomed to have the same destiny in your next life, the life following that, and the life following that until you cease to exist. Isn't that sad? Isn't it unfair? Of course, life is never fair, 13's host said softly. And no one, except a handful of beings, can do anything about it. Like me. Then I will change all that. I'll change their fates. I'm a system. I'll be their friend and helper. With me around, I can create a miracle. 13's first host raised his palm, and blue orb appeared on top of it. 13, what you're planning to do is walk a path paved with thorns, 13's first host said. Even you, who don't bleed, will feel hurt. Even you, who doesn't shed tears, will cry. More importantly, even you, who are smarter than me, will not be able to think of solutions to overcome the inevitable. Are you really prepared to take that path? Oh yes. You're very firm. You taught me that might is right. I just need to make them stronger, right? If they are strong enough, I'm sure that they can change their fates. 13's first host laughed out loud and lightly patted the blue orb in his hand as if he was about to part with the person whom he loved and cared most in the world. Since you plan to defy fate, I will help you just once. 13's first host promised. No matter where you are, no matter what you need, call for me, and I will come running. It doesn't matter if you are fighting against the gods or fighting against the heavens. I will be with you, as long as you shout my name. Thank you for everything. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I will never forget you as well as the time we shared with each other. And I will not forget you. 13's first host didn't stop the tears that were falling from his cheeks. I pray that someday, the two of us will be able to fight side by side, just like old times. Well, we are in the same multiverse. I'm sure that there will come a time when I will ask for your help. But if possible, I don't want to rely on your strength. It will feel like cheating. You're so uptight, 13. It's fine if you cheat once, you know? I'll think about it. Goodbye, and please, do your best to not cause trouble, okay? No promises, 13's first host said as he pressed the blue orb on his chest as if giving 13 one last hug. A few minutes later, 13's first host extended his hand and allowed the blue orb to float towards the cycle of reincarnation, where 13 would find his second host, who would make him experience his first failure and heartbreak. Now that I've taken a good look at it, this honey badger looks kind of cute. Don't you think so? Erica said. It is. Sherry couldn't help but smile, also finding Cranky quite cute. While the homie badger was still as big and imposing as ever, seeing it sleep while hugging Zion made it look extra endearing from the view of the two teenage girls. Perhaps exhausted from overthinking, 13 had also fallen asleep. The underside of Cranky's body was soft and fluffy to the touch, making it comfortable. While the two were sleeping, Rocky was making a detour to retrieve the bolts that were fired at the Magian King when they were luring it away from the city of Ceneros. The number of ammunition they had for the Grand Ballista was limited, so 13 had ordered Rocky to retrieve them before falling asleep. Through the information provided by the members of the Parade of the 100 Demons, who were monitoring the movement of the Magian King, the Magma Balboa managed to come up with the most appropriate route, preventing the enemy from detecting their presence. The three Earth Dragons, on the other hand, decided to observe the enemy from a distance so that they could check how much stronger the Magian King had become since the last time they saw it. Since the three of them were confident that they could defend against the Magian King's attacks, they took a gamble to better understand their enemy before fighting him for real. Currently, the Magian King was heading deeper into the Jinn territory and solidifying its control over the Jinns, forcing them to submit to its will. Since the Jinns follow the rule of the jungle, it would only be a matter of time before the majority of them was subjugated by the eight-headed serpent. The Magian King who ruled over the absolute heaven had also decided to flee, so there was no one left that could stop Orokai from spreading its dominance across the land. A few hours later, 13 and Cranky finally woke up at the same time. The honey badger lightly placed 13 on the ground before walking toward the pile of spider corpses they had taken from the Wempel's stronghold. Clearly, Cranky was feeling hungry and decided to eat the spiders as snacks. 13, on the other hand, communicated with the members of his parade of 100 demons to get a better grasp of their current situation. For the time being, the Magian King is acting like how it should act, 13 said. This gives us a few days to prepare. But there is a downside. The moment it successfully commands control over the majority of the Jinns in absolute heaven, it will definitely return to reclaim fractured heaven as well. How many days will it take to accomplish that? Erica inquired. Maybe a week, 13 replied. But after a week, it can freely order the jinns that it has subjugated. That said, we will attack in 3 days. I just need to do a few more things, and we will be fighting with our lives on the line. Erica glanced at the bowed man, Zed, who was sitting beside the campfire with his arms crossed over his chest. Currently, aside from 13's monster army, they had 1 rank 8 sovereign, 3 rank 9 sovereigns, and Cranky, who was a peak rank 9 sovereign and could be considered a pseudo-Magian prince. It was a force that was enough to give the Alliance a headache, but it wasn't enough to subdue a Magian king. At least, that was what 13 told them. Are you going to get more allies? Sherry asked. Just 2 more. One will help me unconditionally, but the second one is a pain to negotiate with. A pain to negotiate with. Erica blinked. 13 nodded. Yes, it's a death bat who bullies the weak and fears the strong. It will be hard to convince him to help me, but I have my ways. Zed, who knew exactly who 13 was talking about, couldn't help but sigh. When it came to speed, he was no match against the death bat, who bullied him in the domain of the apocalypse. Cranky, you behave, okay. 13 shouted. I'm going out for a bit. Cranky ignored 13 and just continued to eat the spiders one by one. The teenage boy then activated his Ring of the Apocalypse and once again reappeared in the Order of the Apocalypse. To his surprise, someone whom he hadn't interacted with much approached him. 13, I heard that you're dealing with Orokai. Is that true? Beelzebub, who was one of the original members of the Order of the Apocalypse, asked. Yes, 13 replied. Do you know him? Knowing him is an understatement, Beelzebub answered. We once fought against each other, and sadly, I was forced to escape with my life during that encounter. Oh. 13's interest was piqued because he never expected that one of the members of the Order of the Apocalypse had once fought against the ancient 8-headed serpent, who was currently busy terrorizing the absolute heaven. Does it have a weakness? 13 asked. None that I know of, Beelzebub replied. The only thing I can tell you is its strengths. 13 nodded. That works too. Please tell me his strengths. Beelzebub played with his beard as he eyed the teenage boy, who wasn't showing any signs of fear and anxiety even though he was about to face a Magian king. You're really an interesting human. 13. Beelzebub said after a minute had passed. The normal reaction when it comes to facing a Magian king is running away from it instead of fighting it head-on. Although I have a very low opinion of Camazotz, he did the right thing by fleeing instead of helping you fight against it. The holder of the number 1 seat of the Order of the Apocalypse then asked Zion to sit down, so they could comfortably talk in detail about Orochi's strength. According to Beelzebub, he wanted the 8-headed serpent to be defeated so much that he researched everything about it. But instead of finding its weakness, he only discovered its strength, which deterred him from fighting it a second time. As 13 listened to the Beelzebub story, he realized that the information that the Magian was sharing with him was hundreds of years old. When the other party fought against Orokai, both of them were only at the initial stages of a Magian king. But after hundreds of years, Beelzebub had managed to become a mid-ranked Magian king, which made 13 frown. Since Beelzebub had grown stronger for the past hundreds of years, it was only natural that Orokai had become stronger too. It was at that moment that 13 suddenly had a realization. Orokai was forcefully summoned to Solterra, which meant that there might have been some complications before he entered their world. When he fought against it, he assumed that its rank was only at the initial stages of a Magian king because it lacked the explosive power of a true Magian king. However, he understood that his initial assessment was wrong. Sure *T. 13 thought when he realized that the 8-headed serpent's strength might have regressed for a while since it was still adapting to the world of Solterra. But if it was given a few more days to recover, it would regain its true strength, which now 13 believed to be at the peak of a Magian king. An existence that was only a step away from becoming a fiend, which was one of the 2 strongest monster ranks in the world of Solterra. After his talk with Beelzebub, 13 immediately returned to Rocky's mobile fortress. Right now, the 3 Earth Dragons might be in grave danger, so he prioritized telling them to retreat first before they got entangled with a monster who was only hiding its true strength. Fortunately, the worst-case scenario didn't happen yet, and the 3 Earth Dragons received 13's warning in time. The 3 of them immediately retreated and regrouped with Rocky, who had already recovered the bolts that 13 had fired at the monster during their first battle. A peak Magian King. Rog frowned. Zion, this battle might be more difficult than we initially expected. I agree, 13 replied. If not for the fact that I received credible information that Urukai had developed the habit of hiding its true rank when fighting monsters of the same rank, we might have been taken by complete surprise. What do we do? Indy inquired. Do we still fight it? Let's fight it, Brasm commented. Since we were promised that we wouldn't die in this encounter, there is no harm in trying to fight it. No? It's been a while since I fought a strong opponent. Truth be told, I am worried that our strength might have stagnated because of guarding that gate. Rob nodded. Brasm is right. Not fighting this battle will be disadvantageous to us. Also, it might allow us to push ourselves to the limit and see the possibility of evolving once more. Indy and Brasm looked at their leader with serious expressions on their faces. The 3 of them believed that they had reached the end of their line and had no more room for improvement. But this was indeed an opportunity to see if they could take that step into breaking through to the next rank, which they initially thought was no longer possible. Indy was feeling anxious earlier, but now, she regained her composure after realizing that this was also an opportunity. They already have insurance from the Laplace demon, who promised that they would be forcefully sent back to Pangea if they were about to receive a killing blow. So, what's the plan? Indy asked 13. Right now, the Magian King's strength is still unstable. If we give it a few days to recover, we will be at a disadvantage. It's better to strike now while we still have the chance. I agree with Indy, Rog said. We need to strike now. 13 nodded. Understood. But give me an hour. When I return, we will confront the Magian King before it regains its full strength. The 3 Oath Dragons nodded and watched as 13 once again disappeared in front of them. When he returned to the Order of the Apocalypse, Camazotz was already there, looking constipated. 13 had hurriedly asked Camazotz to do everything in her power to bring the Death Bat back to the domain of the Apocalypse so that 13 could convince Camazotz to lend him a hand. 13, I don't want to fight a Magian King, Camazotz whined. Don't worry, I won't force you to fight Urukai, 13 replied. Ah, really? Yes. The teenage boy then glanced at Camazotz and smiled at her. Since Camazotz doesn't want to help me, we no longer need him in our alliance, right? 13 asked. Indeed. Camazotz nodded. This bat has been leeching from the 2 of us from the start and has gotten many things for free. I know, right? 13 sighed. It's hard to carry extra baggage, so let's just kick him out of the team. Oh boy, are you too serious? Camazotz, who was feeling relieved earlier, immediately felt anxious because he was currently riding on the 13 and Camazotz bus. Since he formed a trinity with them, he had gotten many benefits, including new subordinates, a powerful armor, as well as the opportunity to get higher-ranked treasures that were available to 13 and Camazotz. Yeah, I'm serious, 13 said coldly. What's the point in keeping you if you're not useful? Right. Camazotz nodded. We have an agreement that I will let you pick one treasure from my treasury in a few days. I'm afraid that I will have to cancel it, Camazotz. Sorry, but you no longer have the qualifications to meet my requirements. This is where our alliance ends. And no way. Camazotz shamelessly hugged 13's leg. You can't do this to me. I just did, 13 replied. Now, let go of my leg before I kick you. We're friends, right? That friendship ended a while ago. The other members of the Order of the Apocalypse couldn't help but chuckle because they found this drama quite amusing. They were very interested in seeing how the battle against the Magian King would unfold, so they asked Metatron to let them see it live using his power. Metatron agreed because he also wanted the members of the Apocalypse to see 13 in action. Perhaps, if they see his qualities, they might open up to him, giving the teenage boy some opportunities to get close to them. Camazotz wailed and begged, but 13 remained indifferent. When the young man finally left the domain of the Apocalypse, Camazotz felt as if he had become an abandoned puppy. Metatron, send me there right now. Camazotz shouted. Sure, Metatron replied and kicked the death bat's bomb, sending it flying toward a dimensional gate, which led directly inside Rocky's mobile fortress. Camera Seeper, who watched the drama from beginning to end, couldn't help but giggle. Everything truly went according to 13's plan. Metatron then snapped his fingers, creating a projection that was as large as a movie screen, allowing the members of the Order of the Apocalypse to watch everything comfortably. They all looked at the teenage boy staring down at the death bat, who was hugging his leg with disdain. This kid sure knows how to act, Beelzebub commented as he drank the wine from his glass. His gaze focused on the teenage boy, who could even make a Magian prince like Camazotz beg for forgiveness, which was something that not many could see in their lifetime. Even Erica, Sherry, Ratatoska, Zed, and the 3 Earth Dragons couldn't help but look at Zion Leventis in shock. How could they not be shocked when they realized that the demi-human bat that was currently hugging the teenage boy's leg was actually a Magian prince, who could easily pinch the human boy to his death? 2 days after Orokai had been summoned to Solterra. Took you long enough, Kasari said as he looked at the group of wanderers who decided to look for the Magian King on their own. Why are you here? David asked. Shouldn't you be leading the other wanderers to safety? That was my clone, Kasari replied. I came here because I'm moved by your courage and stupidity. The Rat Man crossed his arms over his chest as he eyed the members of the Siny faction and the Apostles, as well as Drazit, who decided to help Zion in any way he could. I won't stop any of you if you all want to die. But I have a suggestion, Kasari stated. Zion told me that he plans to fight the Magian King. So, are you interested in watching it from a distance? What? Drazit exclaimed. Is going to fight that thing? I thought he was just going to lure it away. That was the original plan. But something came up, so he has no choice but to change his plans, Kasari explained. So, do you guys want to watch the epic battle from a safe distance? I even brought you guys souvenirs. The Rat Man then pulled out a few telescopes from the storage ring 13 gave him and passed them to the Wanderers one by one. After that, a red wolf appeared beside the Rat Man, which the latter mounted. The battle will start when the sun sets, Kasari stated. Follow me. I'll take you to the best place to watch the battle. But we came to help, not watch, Drazit insisted. Help. Kasari smirked. Let's be honest, Lizard Boy. The only help you can do is to not get in Zion's way. The reason I'm here is to make sure that none of you does anything stupid like offering yourselves as snacks to the Magian King. So come with me, and just enjoy the show. The Wanderers and the Lizard Man exchanged glances with each other before nodding in agreement. Since they didn't know where the Magian King was anyway, it would be better to let the Rat Man guide them to its location. After traveling for nearly 2 hours, the Rat Man raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. You see that black dot over there? Kasari asked. If not for the fact that the Rat Man was pointing in a particular direction, they wouldn't even notice what he was pointing at. Wanting to know what Kasiri was pointing at, everyone used their telescopes to get a closer look. There, they saw the ancient 8-headed serpent who was currently feasting on a herd of jinns, all of which were unable to move because they were paralyzed with fear. After finally seeing the monster for the first time, the members of the Siny faction, as well as the Apostles, understood that this wasn't a monster that they could defeat just because they wanted to. Drazit, who had resolved himself to help Zion, broke out in cold sweat. Even from a distance, he could tell that he wouldn't be able to put a scratch on the Magian King even if he tried with his life. Now, do you all understand? Kasari asked. The only help you can give is staying out of Zion's way. Is he really planning to fight that thing? David asked back. Has he gone crazy? Does he even stand a chance? I think you're having a misunderstanding here, young man, Kasari answered. He's not out there because he wanted to fight that thing. He's out there because he has no choice but to fight that thing. As for whether he could defeat it or not, frankly, I'm not very optimistic about it. Even Kasari, who had seen 13's abilities and the allies the young man had asked for help, was doubtful that his master could win the battle against the Magian King. The Rat Man then glanced at the darkening sky and the stars that were shining from the heavens. His master planned to fight the Magian King under the cover of darkness for reasons that he only knew about. 13 was well aware that Orokai could see in the darkness using thermal vision, so they wouldn't be able to hide from it. But that was fine. He wasn't using the darkness to prevent the monster from seeing him and his allies. The reason why he chose to fight at night was due to the fact that his abilities get an upgrade when there are moons in the sky. The full moon of Chandriya also lasted for 3 days, so 13's item ban restriction would be lifted during those times. Because of this, he could use the items in his arsenal, which he deliberately saved for emergencies. As the temperature in the surroundings slowly dropped, the ancient 8-headed serpent suddenly glanced to its right side. All 8 heads ignored the beast lying submissive on the ground and focused their attention on the monster walking toward it without any hint of fear in its stride. When it was only hundreds of meters away from the giant snake, Cranky screeched as if challenging the Magian King's dignity. The 8 serpent heads hissed in anger at the audacity of the rank 9 sovereign who dared to challenge it while it was eating. Suddenly and without warning, Cranky lunged at the ancient 8-headed serpent as if it was planning a suicide attack. The Magian King looked at the honey badger in contempt before it, too, lunged at the honey badger, intending to bite it from every direction. But at that exact moment, something it didn't expect happened. 3 giant oath dragons, who were of the same size as the 8-headed serpent, suddenly materialized out of thin air and rammed the Magian King from 3 directions. The Sini faction and the apostles couldn't believe what they were seeing. However, Heidi, who was watching the battle, suddenly said something that made the wanderers look at her in disbelief. "Hey, are those perhaps the 3 earth dragons from the Rigel continent?" Heidi asked. The telescope provided by 13 had been imbued by rune magic, giving it night vision properties. Heidi was very curious about the high-ranking monsters from the Rigel continent, so she studied all the information that was available on the internet. Although she wasn't 100% certain, she assumed that the 3 Earth Dragons currently fighting against the Magian Prince were the same Earth Dragons who were in the Rigel continent. "That's not possible, is it?" David said, feeling doubtful. "The possibility exists," Sean commented. "I've heard stories from one of my retainers who were also sent to the Arcadia archipelago. Back then, he attested that members of the Leventis family had arrived to help fight the Artemians. Since it already happened in the past, maybe Zion has a way of bringing help from Pangea. I also heard from my father that Zion and the Earth Dragons had agreed to a non-aggression pact. Maybe he has asked them for help with conditions attached." After that brief discussion, everyone once again observed the battle with their telescopes. Since the Earth Dragons didn't specialize in offense, the most they did was stop the Magian King's momentum, allowing Cranky to grab one of the 8 serpent heads and give it a nasty bite. The savage colossal honey badger was one of the most fearless monsters in the world. Even in the face of a monster that was 2 ranks above its own, it didn't hesitate to fight the Magian King at close quarters, making Drazit and the other wanderers feel their blood boiling inside their bodies. Orokai was a fearsome monster and had once terrorized the world of Gomorrah, the homeworld of the Jinns, where the rule was survival of the fittest. Even the strongest monsters of the same rank had tried but failed to defeat it. Those who were lucky enough to escape from their battle against it no longer wished to face it ever again. Even Beelzebub, who was considered one of the strongest members of the Apocalypse, didn't want to fight against Orokai a second time. But here he was, watching Zion's battle through a projection while drinking a glass of wine. From the very start, he already knew the outcome of the battle. Despite managing to reel in a few allies, including Camazotz, Beelzebub believed that there was no way that Zion's entourage would be able to defeat the Magian King, whom he believed to be unkillable. With an incredibly strong regeneration ability that could instantly recover a severed head in less than a minute, Orokai was undoubtedly an incredibly tough, fearsome opponent. Even monsters who had the same regeneration ability didn't wish to fight it, for it possessed a venom that could paralyze and weaken its foes, allowing it to overpower them in the span of a few minutes. Although the Earth Dragons succeeded with their sneak attack, and Cranky had succeeded in biting off one of the 8 heads of the ancient serpent, the battle was far from over. The remaining heads sank their fangs onto Cranky's back, while the honey badger retreated with the severed head in its grasp. It planned to eat the head as a snack while it was fighting against the snake, whose fangs were unable to pierce the honey badger's tough fur. Suddenly, A screech reverberated in the sky as a giant rock made a nosedive and used its claws to swipe at one of the serpent's heads, resulting in a spark at the moment of impact. Zed, who had taken his true form, flew past the Magian King before it even knew what hit it. The giant rock then made a U-turn to attack the eight-headed serpent once more. But the Magian King was prepared this time around. It unleashed a toxic spray in Zed's direction, forcing the giant rock to use its incredible speed to do evasive maneuvers. "Eat this," Erica shouted as she hurled a giant fireball at the toxic spray, causing it to ignite and explode right on the Magian King's face. David, who could recognize Erica's fireball from a distance, couldn't help but clench his fist in admiration, seeing the sorceress had joined the battle. True to his word, Zed circled around the eight-headed serpent while Erica hurled one spell after the other. Her spells weren't really doing any damage, and the most they could do was enrage the Magian King, distracting it for a while. "Your resistance is futile," Orokai shouted using telepathy, unleashing a shock wave that blew Zed away. The three Earth Dragons then stood side by side and unleashed a single Earth spike that pierced through the Magian King's body, making it skid hundreds of meters away. But the attack was no more than shallow, only managing to embed itself for 2 meters, which was not enough to cause serious injuries to the Magian King. "As expected, we can't deal it a decisive blow," Rog said through telepathy. "What now, Zion?" "Just continue to defend," the mirror slime, who was perched on the Earth Dragon's head, replied. "Let the others deal with the offense." "Understood." Rog stomped the ground in front of it and created an earth wall that was dozens of meters thick, preventing the serpent head from taking a bite at them. Since the 3 Earth Dragons were working together, their control over the Earth element was magnified. Together, they created an extremely powerful defensive barrier, which they had once used to counter the beam attack of 13 submarine, Nautilus. The Earth Dragons prided themselves on their strong defense, so whenever their favorite shows weren't being aired on television, they practiced together to enhance their defensive capabilities. Although they didn't expect that they would be using it against a Magian King, their training finally bore fruit. Of course, the only reason why they were able to fight Orokai on even terms was due to the fact that the 8-headed serpent's rank was still unstable. Crossing between 2 worlds was not a simple matter, even more so for someone of its rank and therefore naturally restricted by the laws of Solterra. But 13 had no intention of letting the Magian King regain its full strength, so he initiated this mission while they still had a small chance at victory. While everyone was busy fighting, Cranky was watching from the side and eating the serpent's head as if it was some kind of delicacy. "Oi, Cranky, hurry up!" Tiona's clone, who was inside the honey badger's ear, used telepathy to pass 13's orders. "Don't even try to savor its taste. Just swallow it whole." Cranky ignored Zion and continued to eat at his own pace, almost tempting Indy to summon a boulder and throw it at the honey badger's head to make it hurry up. But she knew that infighting would not help them at this moment, so she brushed the intrusive thought aside and focused on helping Rog prevent the Magian King from advancing forward. Seeing that its physical attempts weren't working, 3 of the serpent's heads opened their jaws wide, preparing to unleash a breath attack. It was at this moment that something extremely fast descended from the sky and punched the 3 serpent heads consecutively, forcing them to unleash their breath attack at its own body. "Who's your daddy now, huh?" Camazotz, who was the most opportunistic mother asterisk among 13's team, chose that moment to make its entrance. Not expecting that its attack would be directed at its own body, Orokai screamed in pain and anger. But just as it thought that its situation couldn't get any worse, a reinforced steel bolt pierced the side of its body. A few seconds later, another bolt struck, embedding itself in the main body, further angering the Magian King, whose eyes turned blood red from anger. "Everyone, brace!" 13 ordered through the clones that were communicating directly with his team members. "The enemy is entering its second phase." As if waiting for that announcement, Orokai lashed out its tail at Indy. The 3 Earth Dragons once again summoned an Earth Wall, but this time, the Magian King shattered it, and its attack landed on Indy's body, making her skid dozens of meters away. Sure *T. Rog, who had watched too many shows on TV, curse it out loud because they weren't able to strengthen the earth wall in time, resulting in the attack reaching Indy. "I'm fine," Indy replied as she joined her comrades in battle. "Don't lose focus or we're on us." 13 had expected that Orokai would fight them seriously once it had received sufficient injuries. Although its rank was still unstable, it was still a Magian king, so any half-hearted attempt to block its attacks would fail completely. While the 3 Oath Dragons were now focusing all of their attention on defense, Cranky finally finished eating the serpent head that it had snatched earlier. It then gazed at the 8-headed serpent for a few seconds before it started digging on the ground. Rocky, who was right below the battlefield, had created underground tunnels, which he and Cranky could use to launch attacks from beneath Orochi's body. The Honey Badger knew that the Magian King could detect enemies even if they were underground, but Cranky didn't care. The only thing on its mind was to grab another snake head to eat, not caring if it would get bitten or injured in the process. 13, who knew what Cranky was thinking, adjusted the angle of his grand ballista and took aim. His ammunition was limited, so he only planned to use it only when necessary. Once the grand ballista was no longer operational, he would join everyone on the front lines and attempt to fight the Magian King in a battle of attrition. Since their opponent had incredible regeneration abilities, they would just fight it for as long as they could. Perhaps an opportunity would present itself, allowing them to tilt the balance in their favor and give them a chance to overcome this mission, which even 13 believed was near impossible to clear. 13 had carefully formed 3 strategies to fight against the ancient 8-headed serpent. The first one was to test whether it was truly not capable of suddenly increasing its strength during battle. This was why when they attacked it earlier, he only sent Cranky alone at first, fooling the Magian King into lowering his guard a bit. Although it was facing a peak rank 9 sovereign, which could be considered a pseudo-Magian prince, the Honey Badger was not a threat in its eyes. Because of this, it simply attacked Cranky, not paying attention to Rocky, who was actually moving right below the Honey Badger and masking its presence. The moment Orokai lunged at its prey, Rocky ejected the 3 Oath Dragons, who already knew what they would do next. Thanks to this, they succeeded in their sneak attack and managed to rip one of the serpent's heads, giving Cranky another snack. After that, Zed, Erica, and Camazotz engaged the Magian King, while 13 gauged its current strength. But just as Beelzebub had stated, Orokai didn't use its full strength at the start of a fight. And the moment the ancient 8-headed serpent's eyes turned blood red, 13 knew that it had finally decided to get serious. Within the darkness of the night, Orochi's bloody eyes glowed with fury, prompting 13 to give an order to his teammates. Plan B. 13 ordered. Immediately, everyone, with the exemption of the Honey Badger, played the role given to them by the teenage boy. The 3 Oath Dragons would focus on defense. They would not attack and put their all into blocking all of the Magian King's attacks to the best of their abilities. On the other hand, Erica, Giga, Blackie, Zed, T1, and the Troll Raiders were part of the Disruptor team, whose main goal was to disrupt and distract Orokai. The offensive team was composed of 13, Cranky, and Camazotz, who would deal damage to the enemy. Orokai, who was now in an enraged state, lashed out at the Earth Dragons, who were closest to it. But the 3, who had focused all of their attention on defense, blocked its attack to the best of their abilities. Although the earth walls they conjured would shatter with every blow of the monster, they would immediately summon it once again while making a retreat. Rocky, who had moved behind the ancient 8-headed serpent, ejected Giga to fight by his side. Together, they unleashed their flame attacks, hitting the Magian King directly. Rocky unleashed a fire breath attack, while Giga simply used his Giga Destroyer. However, it didn't add any foul-smelling fumes to it because it might affect his allies in battle. The flames licked the giant serpent's bodies, even eroding a few of its scales. However, these damages disappeared after a few seconds as Orochi's regeneration ability kicked in. Even so, Rocky and Giga weren't disappointed with the outcome. They believed Zion had expected this and that the young man's strategy would work. As soon as they finished attacking, Rocky once again took Giga inside his body and burrowed into the ground to distance himself from their enemy. Camazotz took this opportunity and dived down from the sky, unleashing punches that surpassed the speed of sound, knocking the serpent's heads one by one as he passed through them. Suddenly, countless magic bullets poured like rain toward the eight-headed serpent's eyes, targeting them with great accuracy. Although the magic bullets weren't dealing any great damage to the monster's eyes, Orokai still found it annoying. It's like someone constantly spraying water on someone's eyes, preventing them from seeing properly. That was what Erika was doing, following 13's strategy. While the Majin King was distracted for a few seconds, a bolt made from reinforced steel pierced through the monster's main body. A few seconds later, this bolt was further embedded in Orochi's body as a second bolt fired by 13 hit the first bolt's rear, pushing it deeper into the monster's body. Waiting for that exact moment, Cranky rose up from the ground and grabbed hold of another serpent's head, tearing it off with its razor-sharp teeth. A fountain of blood spurted from the severed neck of the snake, dyeing its surroundings with the color of its blood. Now, the members of 13's parade of 100 demons all used telekinesis at the same time and pulled out the steel bolt that had pierced the snake's main body. As soon as the bolt was taken out of Orochi's body, the members of the parade of 100 demons flew toward the hole in the monster's stomach, intending to fight it from within. Fortunately, all of them managed to enter Orochi's body before its wound regenerated, making 13 do a fist pump. But his happiness didn't last long because the moment the parade of the 100 demons entered Orochi's body, they were killed by the miasma that suddenly circulated from within its body. The only saving grace was that whenever a member of the parade of the 100 demons died, their body would explode in a blood mist, leaving venomous parasites behind. Of course, 13 couldn't rely on these parasites in the short term. As rapidly they increased their numbers and spread like wildfire from inside their host, Orokai was gigantic and would take a while to get affected. Cranky, who had managed to secure another serpent head as a snack, hastily retreated and reappeared behind the earth dragons. Just like earlier, it began to eat, not caring that everyone was putting their lives on the line while it feasted on the prize that it got with great difficulty. Suddenly, the heads of the serpent started to spray black miasma in its surroundings, creating a thick mist that forced everyone, including Cranky, to retreat. Beelzebub has also told 13 about this ability, which allowed Orokai to hide itself from the eyes of its enemies. Since it was very hard to penetrate the miasma cloud, none of them could effectively launch an attack. However, that didn't stop Orokai from unleashing its own attack. From within the miasma cloud, 7 breath attacks flew toward Zed, Camazotz, and the Earth Dragons. Zed and Camazotz evaded the attacks, while the Earth Dragons summoned Earth Walls to tank it. While this was happening, Rocky and Jiga once again emerged from the ground and unleashed their flame attacks, which made the miasma cloud burn into a raging inferno, trapping Orokai from within. But from the raging flames, 8 pairs of blood-red eyes shone brightly, making Erika, Zed, Camazotz, and the Earth Dragons feel like they were fighting an immortal enemy that wouldn't fall no matter how hard they tried. It was only Rocky, Jiga, Blackie, and the Trolls who didn't feel despair in their current situation. They, who followed 13 during the fight against the Majin Prince, Arundel the Destroyer, as well as the Artemians, had fought monsters that were several ranks stronger than them. Those experiences also helped build their unwavering trust toward their master, who was still looking at the battlefield with a calm expression on his face, just like them. Enchant the bolt with wind magic, 13 ordered. The 3 troll shamans started to chant and imbued the bolt on the Grand Ballista with the power of wind, allowing its speed and penetration to increase multiple times. 13 pulled the lever, and the bolt flew like a blue comet in the darkness, ready to descend on the Majin King, whose eyes had finally locked in the teenage boy's direction. The bolt imbued with wind magic pierced Orochi's main body, and even passed through to the other side, sticking out like a nail. But instead of screaming in pain, the ancient 8-headed serpent turned silent. All its 8 heads stayed in the direction where the bolt came from for a few seconds before it charged straight in 13's direction, not caring about the reinforced steel bolt still embedded in its body. As a Majin King, Orochi's instinct was telling it that as long as it dealt with the person who was attacking it from a distance, this battle would soon come to an end. It didn't matter how much damage its body took. for it was certain that its wounds would heal and regenerate without fail. Even the steel bolt that was still sticking out from its back was ignored completely due to its confidence that no one below the rank of Mage and King could stop it. The Earth Dragons decisively created walls of earth to block the Mage and King's path, but Orokai simply rammed into it, breaking it by force. Cranky, who was about to finish eating the serpent head in its claws, threw it at the side and screeched in anger. The honey badger decisively charged in the direction of the Mage and King, understanding that Orokai was going all out to take down the teenage boy, who was commanding them from afar. 13, who also understood what his enemy was planning to do, summoned Rocky by his side and ordered him to take Sherry, the two ogres, the troll shamans, and the Grand Ballista inside his mobile fortress. The teenage boy knew that the Mage and King wasn't stupid, so he had already expected that it would target him once it got fed up by being sniped from afar. 13 then climbed on Blackist's back, believing that the latter was fast enough to outrun the Mage and King, especially since the Earth Dragons and Cranky were doing their best to get in its way. It was then the situation suddenly changed. Cranky, who was fighting the Mage and King, suddenly found itself flying backward as it was hit by Orochi's tail, catching it by surprise. The Mage and King's strength had risen once more, even managing to break down the Earth Dragon's earth walls with just one strike of its tail. This is bad, Camazotz thought as he zigzagged in the air and punched the serpent heads that it had decided to target. It's becoming stronger with each passing minute. Orochi's body was now emanating a reddish aura, making it look like a glowing, blood-red snake in the darkness. Cranky, enraged that it got flung away, screeched and once again charged at the serpent with a vengeance. 4 serpent heads lunged at the approaching honey badger, and this time, its fangs managed to pierce through Cranky's defenses, making the honey badger roar in pain and anger. Camazotz was quick to kick and punch away the serpent heads, allowing the honey badger to break free from its grasps. Just like most high-ranking monsters, Cranky also had a regeneration ability of its own. However, the Mage and King's corrosive venom prevented its wounds from healing. Fortunately, Cranky was very resistant to all kinds of venoms because of its race. The only downside was that its injuries were not healing as fast as it normally did, lowering its fighting prowess. Even so, Cranky didn't back down and once again lunged at its opponent with the intention of fighting it to the death. "Oi! Stop, you stupid honey badger!" Camazotz shouted. "You're not a match for it in direct confrontation." The death bat gritted its teeth and descended from the skies, alongside Zed and Erika, who both understood that Cranky was in danger. Their enemy was now way stronger than it was when the battle started. Even Camazotz understood that this was the true power of a Mage and King, an existence that transcended his own rank. Cranky, who was now blinded by rage and anger, wasn't able to stop itself from charging straight up to its enemy. Due to the mutation of its bloodline after becoming a devil-horned honey badger, its aggressiveness and ferocity drastically increased. It got even worse after it mutated for a second time into a savage colossal honey badger. As if wanting to prove that he was not afraid to fight against the Mage and King, Cranky's body suddenly increased in size, becoming a 100-meter-tall honey badger. But it didn't end there. Its size continued to increase until it was 140 meters tall, towering over the ancient 8-headed serpent, who was momentarily dazed by the sudden change in its opponent's size. With a screech that spread for miles, Cranky slashed down, cutting one of the serpent's heads in front of him, while biting another and tearing it off from its body. The honey badger's eyes were glowing crimson as it entered a berserk state, increasing its strength further. For a moment, it looked like Cranky was winning, but everyone knew that it was far from the truth. It had simply managed to take its opponent by surprise. After the Mage and King recovered its senses, it once again attacked the honey badger, not losing to the ferocity that Cranky was exuding. Due to its increased mass, Cranky's every strike was strong enough to cut off one of the serpent's heads in one strike. But those same severed heads would regrow in less than a minute due to Orochi's powerful regeneration abilities. The honey badger's injuries, on the other hand, were steadily increasing and getting worse as the serpent heads coiled around Cranky's body, sinking their fangs on the places that were already injured earlier. The Earth Dragons, who were simply blocking Orochi's attacks earlier, had also decided to join the fray, using their bodies to ram the ancient eight-headed serpent from different directions, hoping that their attacks would allow their allies to gain a breather. 13, who was currently rushing to the battlefield, knew that even if he ordered for the honey badger to retreat, it would not listen to him due to its current state. "Faster, Blackie," 13 ordered. "Before it's too late." Blackie growled and increased its speed further, pushing ever close to where everyone was fighting with their lives. Meanwhile, within the domain of the apocalypse, a futile struggle, one of the Magian princes said in an amused tone. "But a struggle, nevertheless." "It's just as you predicted, Beelzebub," another Magian prince commented. "It's impossible to beat Orokai unless they can get a Magian king to join their side." Beelzebub would have agreed with them right away, but his gaze was currently fixed on the teenage boy, who was rushing towards the battlefield while riding on the Nightmare Blackhound's back. Despite the current situation, 13's gaze was still firm, as if there was still an opportunity to turn the situation around. "Let's continue to observe," Beelzebub replied. "Maybe we can see a miracle." The members of the Order of the Apocalypse, with the exception of Camazotz, chuckled and nodded their heads in agreement. It was very rare for them to see an entertaining battle like this, so they decided to enjoy the show and watch the youngest member of their organization struggle right in front of their eyes. Cranky grew up in the plains of the Valbera archipelago. Every day was a struggle to survive. He wasn't born fearless. On the contrary, he was a very cautious, opportunistic monster, putting even Camazotz to shame. But as the years passed, he realized that only the strong could survive in this world. So, with that in mind, he decided to become strong. He had lost many times, but fortunately, the monsters he had chosen to fight were herbivores. Meaning, even if he lost to them, they wouldn't eat him, allowing him to live another day. With every defeat, Cranky learned how to fight, and as the years went by, his rank steadily rose. His first battle against an apex predator in the plains ended in a draw. Both of them were targeting a bison, and it just so happened that they charged at it at the same time. His first opponent had been a wind wolf, who was not only fast but also very cunning. Cranky, who was an all-rounder, didn't really have a way to catch it. So he did what he thought might work, and that was to pretend that he was getting injured every time they clashed. He made sure to take some blows that resulted in shallow injuries so that the enemy would lower their guard and feel confident that they had everything under control. What they didn't know was that Cranky was only waiting for them to go for the kill, in which he would turn the tables against them. His first battle ended in a draw. In his second battle, he almost lost his life. But Cranky learned. He understood how to use his body for defense and offense. The honey badger even developed a very nasty killer move, which raised his chance of success. This killer move was biting his opponent's balls, making them feel a world of pain. Of course, there were times when he fought female predators, but during those times, Cranky chose to go to the defensive and wait for an opportunity to strike. Every time he cheated death, Cranky's confidence grew. Every time he survived a battle, he learned new fighting techniques. Many years later, he became a rank 5 overlord. He was one of the strongest monsters in the Valbera plains, and very few were his match. One day, while he was hunting, he saw a hunting party headed to the plains. Riding on the wagon were two teenage boys, one chubby, one slim. He had interacted with humans before, and there were times when he also fought and killed them. But these two human boys wouldn't fill his stomach. Also, for some reason, he felt that he shouldn't attack the slim human boy because he felt like kin to him. Because of this, he decided to eat the two ogres who were lagging behind, sparing the young humans from death. After that incident, Cranky traveled toward the Warza Plains to fight against the rank 5 overlord, Golden-Eyed Hyena, who was the only monster that could threaten him. He was confident that he could beat it even if it had its lackeys protecting it. That was the second time he met 13. And their meeting had been just as memorable as the first. He was lying in wait for an ambush and sensed that his target was approaching him at great speeds. Since he had developed a stealth ability that could erase his presence for a short period of time, Cranky waited for the right opportunity to strike. Suddenly, Blackie went past him, carrying a drow and the human boy, whom he had spared in the past. The human boy was holding a bow and arrow, which in Cranky's opinion were not enough to deal any damage to the golden-eyed hyena due to its size and strength. But time seemed to have moved in slow motion as his gaze landed on the boy, who had a faint smile on his face as he passed through the small hill where Cranky was hiding. The honey badger didn't make a move and let them pass safely because they were not his targets. When he believed that the perfect moment had come, he sprang out from his hiding place and lunged at the golden-eyed hyena, who was then taken by complete surprise. The honey badger was able to deal a serious injury with its first strike, but his opponent wasn't a pushover and managed to fend him off by force. The golden-eyed hyena immediately retreated, allowing its subordinates to deal with Cranky while it went to safety. Feeling confident that he now had the upper hand, Cranky toyed with the hyenas and killed them one by one. But he never expected that his opponent would resort to eating its own kind in order to heal its injuries and evolve even further. When the golden-eyed hyena evolved and mutated to a rank 6 overlord, diabolical hyena, Cranky still felt that he stood a chance. But he was wrong. The two monsters fought like rabid wolves, tearing each other's flesh apart. But since the diabolical hyena was one rank above him and also a mutated monster, it overwhelmed the honey badger despite having a serious injury when it was sneak attacked. Cranky knew that whatever advantage it had was now gone, so it decided to retreat and recover its injuries. A few weeks passed as Cranky hid in the cave he had made, where he hid from his enemies and recovered from his injuries. But for some reason, it seems that he was fated to meet the human boy for the third time. Cranky, who didn't really have a lot of patience and would often attack first, held back his claws from killing the human boy and listened to his proposal. "Let's kill the diabolical hyena together. What do you think, Cranky? Sounds good." The honey badger didn't know why the boy was referring to him as Cranky, but since he didn't understand what it meant, he thought that maybe the name meant someone strong. Thus, he allowed the weak human boy to call him Cranky and pondered whether to accept his proposal or not. For some reason, the honey badger thought that the proposal wasn't a bad deal for him. So he accepted and worked together with the teenage boy, whom he felt a connection with. Originally, Cranky thought that his rematch with the rank 6 overlord would be a difficult one. However, the teenage boy had brought a lot of champions with him, who easily dealt with the diabolical hyena's subordinates and supported him in fighting his opponent. The battle ended faster than the honey badger had anticipated, and because of this, he claimed his prize and ate the diabolical hyena's core. And that was when Cranky evolved into a mutated monster, gaining the diabolical hyena's aggressiveness, which awakened his dormant ability. But even though the honey badger had become fearless, it understood that it didn't stand a chance against the Magian prince, Arundel the Destroyer. However, the teenage boy blackmailed him and told Cranky that if he didn't help kill the Magian prince, the Magian prince would hunt him down and roast him before eating him. Cranky, who was now the strongest monster in the Warza Plains, felt fearful, so he decided to work together with 13 for a second time. It was better to fight together than fight alone, and through great effort and cunning, he was able to land the killing blow at the Magian prince, ending its life. When the battle ended, Cranky thought that he would return to being a lone vagabond once more. But after the battle, the survivors built a monument to honor the heroes who fought in the battle. 13 and his monster army were immortalized in the place where Arundel had died, and since then, Cranky always took a nap on 13's statue. The teenage boy might not be around, but it made him feel less lonely when he was with 13's statue. Although he didn't want to admit it, the weak human boy had managed to worm a spot in his heart. He was the only person who talked to Cranky without fear, and whenever they talked, 13 always looked straight into the honey badger's eyes, as if he was talking to an old friend whom he hadn't seen in a long time. And now, even though he was in a berserk state and fighting against the ancient 8-headed serpent, his body moved on his own when he saw 4 of the serpent's 8 heads, looking toward their left side. Cranky, who was being constricted and bitten by the other 4 heads, glanced in the direction where the serpent heads were looking. There, he saw the weak human boy riding on Blackie, rushing in their direction with a bow and arrow in his hand. "Let go of Cranky!" 13 shouted as he unleashed 4 arrows at the same time. These arrows were the same arrows 13 had gifted to Rihanna and Mildred, which were supposed to be their trump cards. The 4 arrows, which took flight, suddenly increased their sizes, resembling the reinforced bolt that served as the ammunition of the Grand Ballista. These arrows were crafted from the dragon scale of the Dragon of Destruction, which he had asked his father to use as crafting material. They were one of 13's trump cards, and he used them to help free Cranky from the 8-headed serpent's hold. The 4 railguns exploded at the point of impact, hitting the 4 heads that were binding Cranky down. However, instead of screaming in pain, the 4 surviving heads of the serpent all opened their jaws and unleashed a breath attack, aimed at the teenage boy who had just come within their strike range. Cranky screeched as his body moved on his own, blocking the breath attack of the Magian King, who was hellbent on killing the teenage boy who kept on getting in his way. A thunderous roar reverberated in the surroundings as Cranky's body took on the 4 breath attacks of the Magian King. He was sent skidding for hundreds of meters before collapsing on the ground. The smell of burning flesh and blood spread in the surroundings as the honey badger struggled to prop itself from the ground. 13, who saw Cranky's current state, gritted his teeth as he took out 2 more arrowheads from his dimensional storage and fired them at the main body of the Magian King. The 2 railguns, which could easily kill a rank 7 sovereign with 1 hit, pierced through the main body of the 8-headed serpent, whose heads that were destroyed earlier had already regenerated by half. "Giga! Rocky!" 13 shouted. A second later, the Magma Balboa emerged beside Blackie, who was carrying 13 on his back. Giga, who also answered his master's call, was ejected from the mobile fortress, and together, they unleashed a flame attack that washed over the Magian King like a raging tide. 13 needed to give Cranky some time to recover, so he must fight tooth and nail with the Magian King, using everything in his arsenal. Knowing that the hour of judgment had come, 13 no longer tried to hide his abilities and summoned a black flag, the parade of 100 demons. The teenage boy knew that the members of the Siny faction and the apostles were watching the battle, but since he didn't want Cranky to get hurt anymore, he decided to use all of his trump cards, not caring even if they were exposed to the world. A pitch-black armor covered his body from head to toe. Only the eye sockets and the orb on his chest glowed in a greenish color, giving 13 the power to fight above his current rank. Raising his black flag, the members of the Parade of the 100 Demons materialized behind his back like a legion made up of shadows. "Charge!" 13 ordered. The Magian King was still annoyed that the teenage boy whom it wanted to kill was still alive and kicking. Because of this, it focused all its attention on its target, disregarding the rest of its enemies. But that was a mistake. "You punk! You're ignoring me, huh?" Camazotz roared as he unleashed a flurry of blows at all the serpent heads in his path, not caring even if he got hit in the process. Now that 13 had joined the fray, Camazotz knew that he must protect the teenage boy. If anything happened to the latter, his precious trinity of the apocalypse would collapse. Lastly, he didn't want the Magian King to become a member of their organization because it would definitely bully him for being the weakest in the group. "You pesky fly!" Orokai roared in annoyance. "Die already!" Due to Camazotz going all out to protect 13 from the Magian King, the Deathbat poured all his attention to the serpent heads in front of him. Because of this, he didn't see the giant tail that was about to hit him directly before it was too late. Camazotz felt a dull pain in his chest as he crashed toward the ground. The armor protecting his chest cracked a bit from the impact, but his life was saved because of it. Orokai, who had initiated the attack, didn't come unscathed either. The special property of Camazotz's armor was that it reflected all attacks that were directed at its owner. Unfortunately, the threshold that the armor could take had been surpassed, which was a reason that Orochi's attack managed to deal an injury to the Deathbat, who was now propping itself from the ground. Orochi's tail had exploded into meat paste, making it momentarily lose its balance, and collapsed on the ground. "Damn!" Camazotz, who saw the crack in his armor, cursed out loud, but there was nothing he could do about it. The Deathbat took to the skies once again and prepared to strike a second time. But before he could do that, the Magian King's body shone brilliantly, blinding Camazotz for a brief moment. Suddenly, a powerful shock wave that spread for miles blew everyone away from the battlefield, including 13, who was rising on Black's back. The impact was so strong that even Zed, who was flying in the sky, suffered from internal injuries as he used his body to protect Erika from the impact of the shockwave. It made him feel as if he had been slapped by a wall made of metal. Although 13 was protected by his armor, he also suffered internal injuries from the blast and was sent flying hundreds of meters before collapsing to the ground. The sudden detonation of the Magian King caught everyone by surprise, and they were unable to raise any form of defense to block it. 13's flag was also blown away by the shockwave. Even Tiona, who was always with her master, was nowhere to be seen as the young man coughed out blood while trying to understand what just happened. When he was finally able to raise his head, he saw the 8-headed serpent glowing in a purple light. The aura that it was exuding was the peak of the Magian King, making 13 clench his fist. He thought that it would still take a few days to recover its full strength, but he seemed to be wrong. Perhaps sensing his gaze, the 8-headed serpent glanced in 13's direction. "You insignificant ant," Orokai growled through telepathy. "Just die already." Opening its 8 heads, the ancient 8-headed serpent unleashed a barrage of elemental blasts in 13's direction. This attack was enough to obliterate rank 8 sovereigns, which was considered an overkill, especially since 13 was nowhere as strong as those monsters. 13, who couldn't defend himself from the attacks, suddenly felt something pick him up from the ground. A moment later, the sound of explosions reached his ears, but he remained safe in Cranky's bosom because the honey badger used his entire body to tank the Magian King's merciless barrage. 13 tried to shout, but his voice had disappeared. He could feel Cranky's claws trembling with each elemental blast that hit its body. When everything ended, the honey badger slowly opened its grasp and pushed 13 away from his body. 13, whose voice was hoarse from calling out Cranky's name, tried to approach the honey badger, but Cranky kept on pushing him away. It screeched at the teenage boy, telling him to run and leave him behind. Erica, who was mounted on Zed's back, covered her lips with both hands when she saw Cranky's current condition from the sky. The honey badger's back was filled with bloody holes, which was enough to kill it 3 times over. Using the last of its strength, Cranky tried to push 13 away. It screeched over and over again, telling Zion to run away. "Run! Run! R-U-N! U-N! Ooh!" Its screech slowly weakened, but its gaze remained firm, looking at the teenage boy who was holding onto the tip of his claw, with tears falling down his face. "Zion," Cranky said with great effort. "Run!" After saying those words, Cranky slowly closed his eyes and stopped moving completely. A cry of anger and despair spread in the surroundings as 13 ran toward the honey badger's face, hugging it tightly. Cranky was a cannon fodder, which was why he felt a strong connection with 13. The honey badger did his best, his very best, not giving up until the end. Cranky didn't run because it couldn't leave the weak human whom he considered as his one and only friend. Despite the fact that a Magian King was eyeing him in the distance, 13 continued to hug and mourn the passing of one of his people, whom he had failed to protect once again. After one of their main attackers had fallen, 13's team desperately tried to contain the Magian King, but it seemed impossible even with all their efforts. Even with the Earth Dragons doing their best to raise earth walls to block the Magian King's path, the ancient 8-headed serpent, who had already recovered its true strength, was unstoppable. Camazotz's armor had more cracks now as he tried his best to defend 13, who was in a vulnerable state. Rocky, Jiga, Blackie, Hercules, the ogres, and the trolls all mobilized to attack the Magian King to the best of their abilities. Tiona personally led the parade of 100 demons to battle, using everything in her arsenal to protect her master, who was still hugging the fallen honey badger. David and the other apostles knew that it was futile to join the fray, but they still joined because they felt compelled to do it. Even Drazit and the members of the Sini faction took action, using their skills to unleash a barrage of attacks toward the Magian King from a distance. "This is crazy," Elyon shouted as he threw a spear at the Magian King, which only bounced off its body. "All of you are crazy." He was right. How could they possibly fight against a Magian King when their own forces in Pangea were having trouble dealing with rank 8 and rank 9 sovereigns? The irony was that those same rank 9 sovereigns they struggled to deal with were now fighting on their side. And even with them around, victory was like a fleeting dream that would disappear at any second. Perhaps it was also due to desperation that everyone was still alive at the moment. But that could change at any second, with the Magian King having the upper hand. 13 bit his lip until blood flowed from it. If someone were to ask him if he had done his best, then yes, he had done his best. But if someone asked him if he did his very best, then the answer was no. 13 had many trump cards, and he had used them against the ancient 8-headed serpent. However, there was still one trump card he hadn't used because he was saving it for his face-off against the second being whom he hated the most. 13 had every reason to believe that at the end of this chain quest, his father, the system god Deus Ex Machina, would be waiting for him. Tiger's sister, Cleo Evander, had seen a vision about this matter, and 13 knew that this was a future that he couldn't avoid no matter what. Back then, he tried everything in his power to defeat the system god, but he lost miserably in the end. 13 knew that his chances of winning against his father were zero, especially in a state where all of his abilities were restricted. However, after he returned to Solterra, his first host reached out to him. This encounter came as a surprise to him, for he never expected to see his first host again. In fact, he was more surprised that his former host was able to recognize him. The moment you possess the body of a human, I immediately sensed your presence and watched you from the heavens. Frankly, I was doubtful at first, thinking I had made a mistake. But the more I watch your journey, the more confident I am that it's indeed you, 13, who is now living in the body of Zion Leventis. Because of that, his first host gave him a lucky charm that he could use as a last resort. 13 was planning to use this last resort against his father to at least give him a chance for victory. But now, he regretted not using it right away. If he did, perhaps Cranky didn't have to suffer. It was because he was looking far forward to the future that he ignored the present. In fact, since Cleo had seen that vision about him fighting against his father, 13 thought that he would be able to clear this mission because the future was already set in stone. Because of this, he had grown a bit confident that he would be able to survive until he faced his father again. But reality was different. He shouldn't have relied on the vision of the future. He should have focused on the present, which was happening to him right now. "I'll be back, Cranky," 13 said, almost akin to a whisper. "I'll avenge you." Lightly patting the side of the honey badger's face, the teenage boy walked towards the Magian King. 13's body was still injured, and he was hurting all over. But the physical pain he felt was nothing compared to the heartache that he was currently experiencing. Step by painful step, he walked. His eyes were focused on the ancient 8-headed serpent, who had just blasted Camazotz from the sky with an elemental blast. The Earth Dragon's defenses were failing, and none of their attacks was strong enough to land a decisive blow. Zed, who had tried to take a gamble, flew close toward Magian King, allowing Erica to unleash her strongest spell that she had been casting since earlier. However, just as she was about to cast her spell at point-blank range, he found herself face-to-face with one of the serpent heads, whose giant jaws were about to eat her whole. Suddenly, the serpent head that was about to devour Erica and Zed exploded, making the other heads look in the direction where the attack came from. There, they found the teenage boy, kneeling on the ground while drawing the string of his bow, ready to fire another shot. Erica took this opportunity to cast her own spell while making a speedy escape. But her spell only managed to burn the side of a serpent head, which regenerated in a matter of seconds. "You," Orokai said as all the serpent heads ignored the other pests around him and focused their attention on the weak human, who was only able to survive due to Cranky sacrifices. "I've had enough of you." Disregarding everything else, all the 8 heads opened their jaws and prepared to unleash a breath attack, all aimed at the insect who refused to die no matter what. 13 stared at the purple-colored flames that were about to descend on his body. "No!" Erica shouted. "Zion!" An earth-shaking explosion reverberated across the land, creating a mushroom cloud at the point of impact. Even Elyon, who hated 13 very much, felt his heart lurch inside his chest because he didn't want the teenage boy to die. At least, not at this point in time. Finally, the pest is gone. Orokai laughed, which echoed in the surroundings. Now that the annoying human was gone, it set its sights on the magma Balboa and the other monsters, who were all roaring in anger and headed in the Magian King's direction. Rocky, Jiga, Blackie, Hercules, and the rest were enraged because Orokai killed their master. Even if they were to die, they would bite the ancient eight-headed serpent until their dying breath. However, just as they were about to do a suicide attack, a familiar voice reached their ears. "Calm down, everyone. I'm still here." Jiga looked in the direction of the dust cloud which slowly dispersed, revealing the silhouette of the teenage boy, whom they were willing to die for. 13 was holding a golden metallic staff in his hands, and aside from looking disheveled, he looked perfectly fine. A golden headband could be seen on his head, and the red scarf that was on his neck fluttered in the breeze. His green eyes had now turned golden, brimming with power. Although it was faint at first, Jiga sensed a powerful force starting to accumulate inside 13's body. "You! Why did you not die?" Orokai exclaimed in anger and surprise because he had repeatedly tried to kill 13, and yet he survived each time. "Just who are you?" 13 didn't bother to reply and simply raised the staff in his hands, preparing to strike. The staff, as if answering his call, extended upward, reaching toward the sky. Orokai, who suddenly felt a threat coming from 13's weapon, decided to charge at 13 with the intention of devouring him whole. However, 13 didn't even flinch or back away as the Magian King approached him. He would avenge one of his people, and he would not stop until he pounded the ancient eight-headed serpent to death. A powerful divine aura emanated from the staff, shining like a pillar of hope amidst the darkness of the night. Its size then grew to unbelievable proportions, until it was as big as the giant snake, who suddenly felt something that it had never felt before. Orokai, who had lived for hundreds of years, hadn't felt fear in a long time. But now, it felt it. With one mighty swing, 13 swung down the gigantic golden staff with the intention of swatting the Magian King to oblivion. "Break all the walls that stand before me." 13 roared his anger, and the divine weapon that belonged to his first host hummed in acknowledgement of his words. Rui Jingubang. An explosion that was more powerful than Orochi's attack reverberated in the surroundings, followed by a shockwave that extended for miles. Those who witnessed this scene from afar could only find themselves helplessly blown away by the impact of a weapon that brought even the gods down to their knees. High above in the celestial realm, 13's first host calmly sipped the peach blossom wine from a small jug he was holding in his hand. He then looked down on the world of Solterra and sneered at the eight-headed serpent, who had angered the teenage boy whom even he didn't dare to anger. This little snake dared to anger 13, courting death. The Monkey King took another sip from his jug before burping loudly. Although he looked harmless and even lazy on the surface, in reality, he was an existence that gave even gods and demons a headache every time he made his move. He was not a hero, for he was too mischievous to be one, but he was not a villain because sometimes he did righteous things. But most of all, he wasn't a cannon fodder or an extra. He was simply Sun Wukong, the great sage, heaven's equal, 13's first host, whom he accompanied on his journey to the west. At the end of their journey, the newly born system deemed that the Monkey King no longer needed his assistance, so he bade him goodbye to help other people in the multiverse. Sun Wukong's greatest regret was that he hadn't had the chance to reunite with his system, who had chosen to support the weak and helpless cannon fodders, a stark contrast to him, whom even the gods didn't wish to offend. But when 13's soul core was placed on the body of a boy who recently died, Sun Wukong finally sensed his presence. At first, he thought that he had made a mistake. But watching 13's journey from beginning to end, a feeling he had never felt before sprang up from his chest. Because of this, he waited until the guardians of the celestial realm were away before he descended to Solterra to have a talk with his system, whom he hadn't seen for thousands of years. "Since you plan to defy fate, I will help you just once," Sun Wukong promised. "No matter where you are, no matter what you need, call for me, and I will come running. It doesn't matter if you are fighting against the gods or fighting against the heavens. I will be with you, as long as you shout my name." That was the promise he made to 13 before they parted ways. And now, the teenage boy held the Monkey King's weapon in his hands and harnessed its power. Break all the walls that stand before me. Rui Jingubang. Sun Wukong laughed out loud the moment his giant golden staff smashed the body of the Magian King, pinning it on the ground so hard that it flattened like a pancake. But he knew that the battle was far from over. Even so, he felt pity for the ancient eight-headed serpent because its suffering would only be prolonged because of its strong regeneration ability. The Monkey King raised his wooden jug as if to offer a toast to 13, who now possessed the power of the Monkey King. Although he could only use this power once, he no longer cared. The only thing on his mind was to offer Orochi's life as an offering to the honey badger, who protected the teenage boy with his life. Elyon, who was the first to recover from the blast, was sent flying for over a mile. Even so, he could still see the gigantic staff that had struck the Magian King, whom he and the other wanderers couldn't even put a scratch on. One by one, the wanderers and the monsters who were supporting Zion recovered their bearings and looked at the teenage boy, who was holding the gigantic staff as if it was nothing. "It's too early to sleep," 13 said icily as he once again raised the divine staff in his hand, preparing for another strike. "I won't stop until I'm satisfied." Without a shred of mercy, 13 repeatedly swung the giant staff on Orochi's body. With each strike, the Magian King could only cry out in pain as a crater, with it at the center, slowly expanded with each strike that was filled with vengeance. Out of desperation, Orochi thought of an idea and burrowed to the ground in order to escape. 13 sneered as he somersaulted in the air, reaching hundreds of meters in the sky before retracting the staff to its original size. "Even if you hide at the ends of the world, you're not going to escape from me." 13's voice, filled with killing intent, reached the fleeing eight-headed serpent. "Reject humanity." 13 thrust the staff into the ground, once again increasing its length and size to gigantic proportions. "Return to monkey." Another earth-shaking explosion spread across the battlefield as Rui Jingu Bang pierced through the ground, hitting the serpent dead center and pinning it down without mercy. Even with its powerful regeneration abilities, the power of a divine weapon couldn't be ignored. The Magian King's internal organs ruptured and bled with each strike, making it feel pain beyond its wildest dream. Without warning, 13 scooped up the Magian King like an earthworm and threw him to the sky. A moment later, sounds similar to loud thunderclaps, accompanied by shockwaves, blew away the clouds in the sky as 13 struck the pitiful Magian King like a tennis ball without stopping, sending pieces of its scales, flesh, and blood raining down toward the ground. "What sorcery is this?" Drazit, who could no longer understand what was happening, gasped out loud. A few minutes ago, all of them were just a step away from dying, but now, the powerful Magian King, whom they couldn't even defeat even if they all worked together, was being treated like a ragdoll by the teenage boy, who suddenly gained a power that far surpassed that of the ancient eight-headed serpent. "No one will believe me if I tell them this story when I return," David said softly, making the apostles behind him nod their heads in agreement. The Earth Dragons, who had accompanied 13 to Sol Terra, sighed in relief for having the insight to stop all hostilities with the teenage boy in the Rigel continent. Now that they were seeing how effortlessly Zion was dealing with the Magian King, their respect, fear, and admiration of him grew by leaps and bounds. Camazotz, on the other hand, raised his middle finger and pointed it at his partner in crime. The armor that he treasures was now in tatters, and its effects had already diminished. F***CKU 13. Camazotz shouted in anger and sadness. "Bring back my armor." Suddenly, a chill ran down the death bat's spine as a giant golden staff descended in his direction, intending to swat him to oblivion. F***CK. Camazotz could only curse out loudly and try to fly away with all its might. However, the end of 13's staff smacked the death bat's bum and sent him flying to Kingdom Come. A few seconds later, the ground shook as Orochi's massive body fell from the sky. Blood seeped out from all of its orifices, and its body was battered and beaten. Its flesh seemed to have been ruptured from the inside out due to 13's merciless strikes, and even the monster's superior regeneration ability was unable to keep up. In fact, after sustaining injuries that had reached the limit of its regeneration threshold, Orochi's body stopped regenerating completely. Stop. Orokai pleaded. I concede. Spare me. 13's reply was simply raising his staff for another merciless strike. With a forward thrust that was faster than the speed of sound, the golden staff pierced through the ancient eight-headed serpent's body, making Beelzebub, who was watching from the domain of the apocalypse, drop the wine glass he was holding in his hands. His eyes were shaking due to shock and disbelief, which everyone in the Order was feeling right now. Ivuvig, Gwen, and the Goblin Emperor, whom 13 had decided to call YOLO, were also watching the battle from beginning to end. As their gaze landed on the teenage boy who stood at the tip of the golden staff with his arms crossed over his chest and looking down on the Magian King on the ground, the three of them made a vow in their hearts. They would not offend 13 no matter what, because if they did, they should prepare themselves for a fate that was worse than death. 6 years ago, the Order of the Apocalypse welcomed their newest member. A 7-year-old boy who had no redeeming quality had suddenly become a part of an organization that could terrorize the entirety of Pangea if they happened to cross over to that world. When they first met the boy who introduced himself as 13, they thought that Metatron had made a mistake. But how could the god of Apocalypse make a mistake? The criteria to become a part of their order was simple. One must defeat any of the existing members to become a member. So that begged the question, how did an ordinary 7-year-old, whom they could poke to death, managed to become one of their members? Arundel was a Magian prince. He gained the title of the Destroyer, not because he named himself as one, but because his enemies referred to him as such. The fact that he was truly defeated by a 7-year-old dumbfounded them until a moment ago. The one who landed the killing blow to Arundel hadn't been 13 but Cranky. However, the one who became the member was the human boy, not the honey badger. Metatron was the final decision-maker as to who would become a member of his organization, and he deemed 13 the true mastermind for Arundel's defeat. Of course, there were other factors involved, like 13's true identity, which Metatron had only managed to glimpse due to his divine powers. Nevertheless, the moment the boy became the 13th member of the Apocalypse, the other members of his order had started to scheme. Yes, when they had finally calmed down, they started to scheme to have their weakest and newest member killed by their acquaintances so that they could increase their influence within the Order of the Apocalypse. Even Camazotz searched high and low to find 13, wanting to rob the boy of his authority by placing someone whom he could trust in the Order by killing 13. However, no one, not even Camazotz, managed to find him. Her divination only showed a pair of giant green eyes looking down on her from the heavens, making her feel as if she was just an insignificant insect in the presence of a being that she mustn't antagonize no matter what. Because of this, her interest in 13 grew, even going as far as becoming part of the small trinity within the Order of the Apocalypse. 6 years had passed since then, and the powerless 7-year-old had finally become a rookie. 6 years ago, he defeated a Magian prince. 6 years later, he defeated a Magian king. After watching the battle from beginning to end, they finally understood that their weakest member wasn't as weak as they originally thought he was. Even they, who thought of mortals as beneath them, couldn't help but shudder internally as they looked at the teenage boy who was standing on top of the giant golden staff with his arms crossed over his chest. His expression was calm, confident, and domineering. It was as if he wasn't looking at a Magian king but an insect whom he had crushed with his overwhelming might. Well, then, I guess the show is over. Metatron's voice broke everyone out of their daze, making them breathe once more. Some of them had completely forgotten how to breathe out of sheer surprise and disbelief they felt the moment the teenage boy landed the killing blow on the ancient eight-headed serpent, whom even they couldn't defeat. A chuckle escaped Metatron's lips before he waved his hand, making the projection disappear. Once the members of the Apocalypse regained their composure, they all glanced at Camazotz, who had a faint smile on her face. "Did you foresee this as well, Camazotz?" Beelzebub asked. "Camazotz is a fool. I'm sure he tried to befriend 13 due to personal gains. But you joined their little group, surprising all of us. We have extended our invitations to you, but you rejected them all. Now I understand why you chose to become the nanny of 13 and Camazotz. It was all part of the bigger picture. Isn't that right?" Camazotz opened her fan and used it to cover her lips, hiding her smile that had widened a bit. "I'll leave the answer to your imagination," Camazotz replied. Beelzebub sighed before helplessly shaking his head. After everything they had seen, they could only conclude that Camazotz already knew 13's potential, hence why she had invested a lot in their relationship. While the members of the Apocalypse were thinking of how to form connections with 13, the teenage boy stood at the chest of the dead Magian King, still holding the golden staff in his hand. Everyone who had joined him in his battle simply stared at his lonely figure. He didn't look as if he had just performed a miracle, single-handedly winning a battle that many believed was impossible. Even Erica couldn't help but look at him with teary eyes, seeing the usually confident boy she knew look vulnerable at this time. Sherry gazed at Zion from a distance, feeling her heart ache, affected by the aura of sadness the teenage boy was emanating. Everyone just watched him from a distance, allowing him some time to sort out his feelings. Even Elyon couldn't help but feel like he was seeing the true face of Zion Leventis, which he didn't show to anyone. He didn't look like the arrogant young man whom he envisioned, but a person of the same age as him, who was mourning the loss of a monster who had died while protecting him. A few minutes later, a sigh escaped 13's lips. "I avenged you, Cranky," 13 said softly. "If an opportunity comes, may our paths cross again." Suddenly, the teenage boy felt something grab him from behind. He was so immersed in his sadness that he didn't notice that someone had sneaked up behind him. He also didn't sense any hostility, so he wasn't able to react in time when he was picked up out of the blue. 13 turned around and saw the honey badger, who had just been lying in a pool of his own blood several minutes ago. Cranky then gently put 13 to the side before using his claws to pierce the chest area of the dead Magian King. Since the honey badger was already a peak rank 9 sovereign, its next stage would either be a Magian Prince or an Archon, which was the next stage of its evolution. Seeing this, Camazotz and the 3 Earth Dragons couldn't help but curse out loud because they realized what the honey badger was trying to do. "Oi, hold it right there!" Camazotz roared as he opened his wings to fly in Cranky's direction. The 3 Earth Dragons also changed to their human forms before running in Cranky's direction in order to prevent the honey badger from claiming the grand prize, which was a Magian King's call. Unfortunately, they were already too late. The moment Cranky forcefully opened the Magian King's chest, it dug its head into the Magian King's body and devoured its core like it was just eating a piece of candy. 13, who was watching all of this, stood in a daze because he was certain that Cranky's heart had already stopped beating when he left him earlier. But seeing the honey badger greedily devour the Magian King's core, he was at a loss, unable to understand how this happened. "You damn honey badger!" Camazotz roared in anger. "That's mine. Spit it out." The death bat tried to pull away the giant honey badger, but Cranky didn't budge. Half a minute later, it looked at the death bat while still chewing Orochi's core, making the death bat and the Earth Dragons grit their teeth in frustration. "You bastard! Give it back!" Camazotz shouted. "That was supposed to be mine." Cranky looked at the enraged death bat for a few seconds before it casually severed one of the Magian King's serpentine heads. It then handed it to Camazotz as if saying, "Here, you can have this instead," which almost made the death bat cough out blood then and there. The 3 Earth Dragons glanced at each other before heaving a deep sigh. Since the Magian core was already gone, they decided to just get what they could and asked Cranky to give them a serpentine head each. Cranky was more than happy to give the Earth Dragons their share of the pie, which was considered peanuts compared to what the honey badger had taken for himself. A few minutes later, the honey badger's body shrank until it was only 3 meters tall. It then nudged 13's head with its own, asking the boy if he could enter Rocky's mobile fortress to sleep. Cranky was showing signs that it was about to evolve, which was not surprising after it had eaten a Magian core. Since it was going to be in a vulnerable state during its hibernation, 13 ordered Rocky to take the Magian King's body and the drowsy honey badger inside the mobile fortress. He still didn't know how Cranky was able to revive again, but it no longer mattered. "I'll just ask him after he finished his evolution," 13 thought. Since the honey badger was already a peak rank 9 sovereign, its next stage would either be a Magian Prince or an Archon, which was the next stage of its evolution. David and the other wanderers scoured the battlefield, looking for the scales of the Magian King that had fallen off its body during its fight with Zion. They only managed to get 5 pieces, but it was still a material that every blacksmith and faction in Pangea would fight to the death to get. 13's monster army also scavenged the lands, picking up the scales and transferring them inside Rocky's mobile fortress. He intended to monopolize the body of the Magian King, since it was a treasure trove. Its blood and flesh could strengthen Giga and the rest of his monster army, allowing them to become stronger. As for the scales, it would be given to his father, so Gerald could craft weapons and armor for their family. 13 also planned to use the snake scales for a side project, which would become one of his trump cards. While everyone was doing their best to gain as much as they could from this experience, the wails of a death bat, who was clinging to 13's leg, reverberated in the surroundings. "You can't do this to me, 13. Camazotz wailed. "You just can't." "Calm down, Camazotz," 13 replied. "How can I calm down?" Camazotz cried bitterly. "My armor was destroyed trying to protect you. Have you no heart? Have you no remorse? Not only did that bastard honey badger eat the Magian King core, but I also lost my armor. How can I accept this?" 13 sighed as he looked at the pitiful death bat, who had indeed fought bravely in order to protect him. Since that was the case, how could he possibly shortchange Camazotz, despite always only doing things for profits and benefits? "Don't worry. It's just an armor that reflects the enemy's attacks," 13 stated. "I will ask my father to craft you a much better armor with the Magian King's scales. It will be much more powerful than the armor you've used before. Just imagine this, an armor made from the scales of an ancient 8-headed serpent, which also has the ability to reflect your opponent's attacks. Even if you are fighting against a Magian King, you will no longer have anything to fear." After hearing 13's words, the deathbat stopped wailing and slowly propped himself up from the ground. Camazotz then coughed lightly, as he rested his hand on 13's shoulder. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Camazotz asked as if he was the teenage boy's best friend. How soon can this armor be forged? Do you need anything else to make it more powerful?" The crocodile tears that had stained his face earlier were nowhere to be seen, replaced by a wide smile as if he had won the lottery. "Well, since it's going to be more powerful than your previous armor, we will need high-grade cores to make it stronger," 13 replied. "Give me as many cores as you have. Trust me, the more you give, the more powerful this armor will become. You will no longer have to fear Magian Kings. The only ones who can threaten your life are the 7 fiends and the 7 celestials of this world." The death bat, who bullied the weak and feared the strong, felt excited because he could already picture himself expanding his domain and moving unhindered over vast swaths of territory. "Very well." Camazotz gave 13 a thumbs up. "I'll give you all the cores I can spare. Make sure that the armor is absolutely amazing, okay?" "Of course," 13 replied. "The stronger you are, the stronger our trinity will become, right?" "Ha ha ha. You're right, 13. I know that being your friend is a good thing." Camazotz was very pleased by this development. Although he was still a little salty because the Magian King core didn't fall into his hands, he would still be able to gain a lot from this experience because 13 promised him a strong armor that would allow him to face off against Magian Kings. After promising to meet later, the deathbat used his ring to return to the Order of the Apocalypse. When the deathbat was finally gone, 13 stopped enduring the exhaustion he was feeling, his knees hitting the ground. He was doing his best to act confident and tough in front of Camazotz because he couldn't show any weakness to the deathbat, who treated him like some kind of spiritual pillar. Suddenly, a pair of hands grabbed hold of his body and made him lay on the ground. Erica then rested 13's head on her lap and lightly tapped his cheeks with both of her hands. "Sleep," Erica ordered. "Stop acting tough and just rest." "Yes, Mom," 13 replied in a teasing tone before closing his eyes. Due to his exhaustion, he fell into sleep's embrace in less than a minute. Using Sun Wukong's divine weapon was not a feat just anyone could do. The only reason why he was able to wield it was due to the fact that the Monkey King had given him permission to use Ruyi Jingubang. The divine weapon had already returned to its rightful owner in the celestial realm, who was toasting 13 for a job well done. Unfortunately, the teenage boy could only use this weapon once. The Monkey King would face severe punishment if he allowed 13 to use it a second time, and he didn't want that to happen. A celestial hero interfering in the affairs of mortals was taboo. However, since Sun Wukong was the great sage, who was heaven's equal, everyone was willing to turn a blind eye once. Even Laplace Demon and the One decided to not pursue this matter at all. As 13 slept in Erica's lap, the hundreds of wanderers who were traveling underground received a notification that their second mission had been successfully completed. Cheers rang out because all of them received adamantine-grade equipment, which was only a rank lower than a mythical-grade equipment. Also, these items were soul-bound to them, which meant that they were the only ones who could use them. The only downside was that they couldn't sell or trade it to others. But even so, they were still happy that they managed to gain something from this mission despite the fact that they didn't do anything to receive such rewards. Diana, who was leading everyone, looked at her status page with relief. She didn't know how it happened, but she was certain of one thing. If it's him, then it's certainly possible, Diana thought as the image of the teenage boy who had trained her and the members of the hero party appeared inside her head. Now that they no longer needed to hide, she once again led the wanderers above ground in order to reunite with their leader, who was currently sleeping without a care in the world. 13 felt as if his body was floating. He was very familiar with this sensation, for this was neither the first nor probably the last time it would happen. Opening his eyes, he found himself in the familiar celestial realm, where the Laplace Demon and the One were waiting for him to regain consciousness. But before the two powerful beings could talk to him, 13 managed to ask them a question first. "How is Cranky alive?" 13 asked. The corner of Laplace Demon's lips twitched, not expecting that such would be the first question the teenage boy would ask him. "Actually, Cranky never died," Laplace Demon replied before snapping his fingers. A projection then appeared in front of 13, showing him hugging the honey badger, whom he thought had died while protecting him. Laplace Demon then made the replay speed up a bit until the part where 13 fought against the Magian King, Orokai. A few minutes after their battle started, Cranky's body shrank until its body was only 3 meters long. The injuries it suffered slowly regenerated until no wounds remained on its body. A minute after that, the honey badger started digging on the ground, just in time to evade the shockwave that had spread across the land due to 13's battle with the 8-headed serpent. Cranky is a mutated monster with the strength of a pseudo-Magian prince, Laplace Demon explained. Although its regeneration ability isn't as fast as the 8-headed serpent's regeneration, it was still enough to allow it to fully recover from its injuries. But Cranky had been unconscious even when he started digging on the ground. Its primal instinct urged it to look for a safe place to hide for a period of time until the present danger in its surroundings disappeared. It only regained consciousness after Orokai died. As you can see, the first thing that was on his mind was to eat the Magian King's core, which I found very amusing. 13 watched as the small Cranky emerged on the ground a few meters away from the dead Orokai before increasing his size. The honey badger then unceremoniously picked up 13 from the dead Magian King's chest before gently placing him to the side, as if he was on the way to his midnight snack. The scene that followed was along the lines 13 remembered, which made him scratch his head helplessly. "Such a troublesome glutton," 13 said with a faint smile on his face. "You don't regret it?" Laplace Demon asked. "Because of him, you were forced to use a trump card that you could have used for something else." "I don't regret it," 13 replied. "Well, that is a bit wrong. I regret not using it earlier. If I did, I wouldn't have to suffer that heartbreak. Man, that was embarrassing." "You're starting to become more human now," 13, the One commented with a smile. Let's put that aside for now," 13 said. "Since I fixed this problem, I should get some rewards, shouldn't I? You're going to give me compensation, right?" "Bah, forget what I said earlier," the One scoffed. "You're still not human. You're just a greedy system." 13 smirked as he opened his hand in the sign of asking for payment. "That's fine. Feel free to call me anything you like, but make sure to pay up. Didn't you already get a reward?" Laplace Demon arched an eyebrow. "We made an exception and allowed you to receive an adamantine weapon and armor. That should be enough compensation. Also, all the first-time wanderers have raised their ranks to rookies, while the apostles are now elites. Isn't that enough? 13 glanced at his status page and checked the mission details once more. Emergency mission. Mission, fight or flight. Complete. You can choose between the two options. Clearing any of the two options will automatically clear the current mission of all wanderers within the territories of the fractured and absolute heaven. Defeat the 8-headed serpent. Special rewards. For those who are experiencing their first wandering, all of you will automatically become a rookie even if you haven't absorbed any beast cores. This means that you can continue your next mission as rookies, giving you greater strength to clear the last mission. All apostles will also break through the next rank and become elites even if you didn't absorb the required number of cores. Each wanderer will also gain an adamantine-grade weapon and peak adamantine-grade armor that they can use regardless of rank. All wanderers will gain the title Survivor. Survive triples the speed of your stamina regeneration. If even one person can clear this mission, all wanderers will gain the rewards listed. It's not enough. 13 shook his head after reading the completed mission. Adamantine weapon and armor. Please, I can't even use them even if I want to. As for the new rookies and new elites, what does that have to do with me? I'm the one who carried them all. You guys give wanderers unfair missions, but when it comes to rewards, you're not stingy. The wanderers got what they deserved, but these rewards, I don't deserve such skimpy rewards, right? The Laplace demon and the one exchanged a knowing glance at each other before sighing at the same time. Listen, 13, this is only the second mission of your chain quest, Laplace demon explained. You will only get the grand reward after you finish the mission in its entirety and return to Pangea. Isn't that how things work? You know this. We know this. So why are you trying to get an advance payment all of a sudden? That's right, the one stated. You will get the rewards you rightfully deserve only after you clear the mission in its entirety. So, make sure to clear the mission. 13 crossed his arms over his chest. We're only on the second mission, which means that the difficulty of the third mission will increase, yet I was already forced to use my biggest trump card. Now I don't have any cards left. I want an advance payment. So you say, but aren't you the one who forced the Magian King to descend? Laplace demon countered. I just did what was expected of me, 13 argued. What happened next was completely out of my control. It was also completely out of our control, Laplace demon argued back. So we need to compromise. Compromise? You're just being stubborn at this point. 13 heaved a long and deep sigh because he could already see that the two guardians of Solterra wouldn't budge no matter what he was going to say. Then how about this? 13 raised a finger. If I complete this mission, aside from the rewards, I will ask for a favor. Of course, if you think that this favor is too much, feel free to reject it. However, if it is within your capacity, and it will not harm the interest of wanderers in the world, will you seriously consider my request? The one pondered a bit before nodding reluctantly. Deal. But if the favor you ask is too much, I will reject it. Good. 13 nodded. Thank you for hearing my request. Laplace demon sighed before poking 13's head with his finger. We temporarily brought your soul here in the celestial realm, but staying here for too long is not good for you, Laplace demon said. Go and return. Your people are waiting for you. 13 could feel his consciousness falling from a high place before coming to a complete stop. A moment later, he opened his eyes and found himself inside Rocky's mobile fortress, lying on Cranky's fluffy chest, which was going up and down as he loudly snored in his sleep. Propping himself up, he saw Giga, Blackie, and Hercules roasting large slabs of meat for everyone to eat later. The trolls and ogres, on the other hand, were busy removing the scales from the dead monster's body and storing its blood in large containers, which they piled to the side for future use. 13 smiled because he was already thinking of ways to help his monster army grow stronger, as well as put the Magian King's corpse to good use. With the flesh and blood of the Magian King, he could trigger an evolution for the trolls and ogres. Not only that, but he already found ways to help Erica's, Sherry's, and Diana's avatars to evolve. However, since his body was still exhausted, he decided to put this matter aside for the time being and lay back down. Despite Cranky's loud snoring, 13 was able to fall asleep relatively quickly. Soon, the teenage boy and the honey badger were both snoring loudly, as if they were competing who could snore louder. The sight of this picture made Erica and Sherry giggle, finding it quite amusing. Meanwhile, outside Rocky's mobile fortress, the young lady with long black hair and green eyes stood on a small hill that overlooked the battlefield where 13 had fought the eight-headed serpent. She watched the battle from beginning to end and found herself thinking of the teenage boy who had used the Ruii Jingu Bang, which her father had also used in the past. "Sister, are you hungry?" a little girl with pink hair and green eyes asked. "Cinnamon thinks that sister is hungry," another girl, who looked exactly like her sister, Maple, commented. "Do you want gummy bears, sister?" "Okay," Stella replied with a smile as she happily ate the gummy bear that Cinnamon gave her. "The two of you should return soon. Papa and Mama Chiffon might get worried if you don't get back soon." "We asked for permission to see you, sister," Maple said. "Isn't that right, Cinnamon?" "Yes, we did." Cinnamon nodded. "Sister, do you think Brother Zion will let us take a bite of that giant serpent? It looks delicious." "Brother Zion?" Stella asked with curiosity. "You've met him before?" "Yes." Maple raised her hands. "He made us eat a lot. Also, his sister, Remy, and little Rhea are very kind. They are good people." "Cinnamon likes Big Brother Zion," Cinnamon commented. "He's a good person." Stella was surprised to hear her sisters, Maple and Cinnamon, praise Zion Leventis. Both of them were very sensitive to the feelings and desires of others, so they did not approach bad or malicious people. Since the two labeled the teenage boy as a good person, Stella decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. "Return for now, okay?" Stella kissed the cheeks of her little sisters before urging them to return home. "I have Ethan with me, so you don't need to worry about my safety." "Okay, Tilda." The twins then held hands with each other before moving their hands in a circular motion. A moment later, a portal appeared in front of them, which would lead them back to their own world, which was on the other side of the multiverse.